Hi, good afternoon. We're going to get started at this point. I have to confess I feel humbled to seeing some of the faces in this room, half the faces in this room, to be sitting up here with Mike teaching that class instead of me. And so I don't know that we can teach you much today, but I think what we can do is remind you of the things that you know and maybe you've forgotten or maybe put away in some back drawers of your mind. And so I think that's what we're probably going to do with many of you. We're going to remind you of things that you really know but may have forgotten. My name is Francisco Fermat. I was a judge in Superior Court for 27 years, retired 3 years ago. During that time, I tried a lot of jury trials. My biggest year, I tried 30 jury trials. The next year, I tried 28. And then I learned that people get a better quality of justice through a settlement than through a trial. And then I started a different focus, and I tried to settle cases more. And I found that I enjoyed my work, and I found that I did a better quality of justice, more satisfying justice, by doing settlement conference work than by saying sustained or overruled. I'm delighted to be here. I am no longer tied to that Monday to Friday calendar. And now I'm a part-time mediator, arbitrator, and close to full-time grandpa.
Oh, my turn? Okay. Yeah, humbled is not exactly the word I'd say used for looking at the faces I see out here. As Frank said, a lot of you have done as many of these as we have and know as much as we do. The difference is between you guys and me is I can't say no when they ask me to do these things. So Frank and I are here. I've practiced law in Orange County for 43 years. I paid a lot of attention to the rule of professional conduct, which says when you get old, you got to become a mediator. So I got old about 10 years ago, got some mediation training, and started doing that. At the same time, started doing a lot of these MSCs, and we're going to talk about some of the things that we have learned. I know you all have learned doing those things. In addition to being a trial lawyer, and in fact, I am in trial right now. We've just finished our it's either our 5th or 6th week of trial on 102, and we're going back on Monday, so my mind has not exactly been on this this presentation recently. But in addition to being a trial lawyer for the last 43 years, I've had 6 years as in-house general counsel for Ocean Pacific Sunwear, which is the OP clothing brand, which I think some of you older people remember OP. And all I'll say about that was the best single lawyer job in the world, and I was very disappointed when they went into bankruptcy and got sold to somebody else. I started doing MSCs actually a long time ago. It was in the late 70s, early 80s. It was different then. There was no central pro tem office. There was no GINA to take care of everything that we needed taking care of. Basically, you knew a judge or a clerk, and they would call you up and ask you if you wanted to do some MSCs. And why did I do it? There are several reasons. It was and still is a great way to get to know the court clerks and the staff. Back then, we were allowed to give them cookies and candies at Christmas, and we did. Second, it was not a bad way to get to know the judges who handle the kind of cases that you practice in and that you try. And third, and most importantly, you got to see how lawyers settle how they handle their cases and how they settle their cases. You learn the value of cases. That was a really good training for me. Today, of course, the process is much more formal. We have to be trained. We have to be ethical and things like that. We can't give cookies to anyone anymore. So, we're going to go off Frank's outline that Frank prepared. In fact, we used the same outline, I believe, 3 years ago when we did this. We've learned a little bit more, I hope, since then. But in terms of questions, we never did answer this. Do you want questions while we're going along, or I would?
We can welcome questions as we go along, sure.
And comments. Okay.
All right. Preliminary matter. Conflict it's not just in Superior Court. Conflict is in daily life. You go back to Adam and Eve, boy, did they have a conflict. When they got thrown out of the garden, I'm sure Eve had a conversation with Adam and said, wait a minute, what did you tell God? The woman that you gave me made me eat the apple. I think that was the first conflict ever. We go to Cain and Abel, we go to Joseph and his brothers, we go to your home this past week. Your home this past week. My wife wants to buy a certain kind of car, and we have a bit of a disagreement. And conflict sometimes spins out of control. And the conflicts that we handle in Superior Court are conflicts that spin out of control. But remember, if you're human, you have breath, you have conflict. We have conflict all the time. We have developed tools for handling those conflicts so that those conflicts do not get out of control. And our goal here is peacemaking in the same way that the goal is peacemaking at home with our children, grandchildren, spouses. Our goal is peacemaking. Victor Hugo had a famous quote. He said, "I have been ruined twice in my life. Once when I lost a lawsuit, the other one when I won it." And it's a quote that I use often in cases where the parties are allowing the case to become the monster in the room. The homeowner association disputes where they're fighting over some trivial thing, a door, a window, something that a neighbor did, and they've spent $800,000 in attorney fees fighting that issue. And at the end, somebody's going to get bit. Somebody's going to get bit by an attorney fees clause. And those are cases that spin out of control and that really demand somebody to step in early. The case that Mike is trying right now is a case where that really has gotten out of control. The other side just should step to the table and settle, and yet they are litigating, and at the end, both sides will lose because of the nature of our system. I tell parties at settlement conferences and mediations, we have the best system of justice in the world. You're going to get a non-corrupt judge. You're going to get a jury of 12 people to make the decision, people that you select yourselves. But the problem with our system is it takes so long to get to trial. When I left the bench, I think that it took about 18 months to get to trial, and now our civil panel is smaller. Now it takes longer to get to trial. It's not getting better. And then the cost of litigation. The cost of litigation is such that, like Victor Hugo said, you can win the trial and you end up losing. So the settlement work that you do is even more important than ever. When I first arrived in Superior Court, I thought that I was a trial judge. My job was to try cases back to back. One year I tried 30 jury trials. The next year I tried 28 jury trials, from 2 or 3 day slip and falls to 2.5, 3 week med mounts. And then something happened. I tried a quadriplegic case. 26-year-old woman turned down $1.5 million at settlement conference. She said, "Judge, I need at least $6 million. I need 24-hour care for the rest of my life." She took it to trial and turned down that $1.5 million, and the jury gave her zero. Zero. In my department, Department 25. And the next trial I had was a case that could have been settled for $450,000. Someone was suing a business and did not settle at $450,000, and the plaintiff got a $4 million verdict, including punitive damages. $4 million. I got to see back to back the harshness of justice. Harshness towards the plaintiff, harshness towards the defendant. And then the very next case I tried, thank God, which is the little fender bender case, verdict $25,000 in favor of the plaintiff. And it was my custom to always talk with the jurors afterwards. I bring the jurors in chambers and we chit-chat, and then the foreperson of the jury said, "Judge, was it really necessary to pull the 12 of us out of our lives to try this case? And could an effort have been made to settle this case?" "Oh, I should have. I gave this case a settlement conference, and I gave it a whole morning, about 2.5 hours, to try to settle the case and not settle, so we teed it up in the afternoon." And then he said to me, "Judge, could a greater effort have been made to settle this case?" And then suddenly a light bulb went off. I said, wait a wait a minute. People come to Superior Court because they're in a conflict and they need to find closure that is dignified, proper, elegant closure to this case. They don't really come here to gamble because, you know, if you try the same case in front of 10 different juries, on most cases, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, sometimes you win so big that it forces the other side to appeal. People really come for closure of that conflict. And so if I can help provide them a closure, a way out, I am a much better judge than if I try 30 jury trials next year. So then I removed my self-set arbitrary limit of 2.5 hours a morning to a settlement conference. If it was going to be a 7-day jury trial, why not give it a full day, so long as we were moving forward? In the settlement conference for a day and a half. The next year, I went down from doing 30 jury trials to doing 3 of my cases from my own department and being able to open to other departments to try and settle the cases. And that's how I handled settlement conferences the rest of my career. I felt very strongly that a judge gives the best quality of justice through a settlement rather than through a trial. Now that's not a philosophy that's espoused by most of our judges on this bench. Very few of the judges here give substantial amount of time to settlement conferences, and that's where your work is so important. The work that you do here is more important, as pro tems, is more important than the work that the judges do at the courthouse, with the possible exception of a juvenile and family law, where we're dealing with the lives of kids. I think the work that you do in peacemaking is more important than the trial work that the typical judge does on a daily basis. I don't think I can teach most of you in this room anything, just remind you of some things. You're a temporary judge. You're impartial. Don't use the word neutral. The word neutral means to some people that you don't care. I'm neutral. I don't care. You really do care. Most cases are about money. Some cases are less about money and more about relationships that have gone wrong. Now, these are the most difficult cases to settle of all. I'm talking about the neighbor disputes, the homeowner association disputes, the family law disputes, the sibling disputes where they went into business together, they bought a house together, they're suing one another. Now, those cases are really difficult to settle. Why? Because you've got underwater, deep emotional issues that logic is just not going to resolve. Reason is not going to get there. At some point, you need to help them realize that this decision that they're making, this position they're taking is driven by deep emotion. And until you do that, those cases just are not going to settle. And in these types of cases, these are cases where you will need to meet the parties face to face, and you need to help them to recognize the emotions and deal with the emotions. Otherwise, you're not going to get anywhere. I remember after 16 years on the bench, I went to family law. Stayed there for 7.5 years. And I remember bringing my knowledge of settlement techniques to family law and not getting anywhere. And I would talk with the lawyers in chambers trying to settle, and the lawyers would say, you know, Judge, I could recommend that to my client, but I couldn't get my client to accept it. So then I started doing settlement conferences from the bench. And I would engage the parties. And then the issues that were under the surface would start to surface. And it's after those emotions surface that the case could settle. And the lawyers felt very uncomfortable with the whole process, because as lawyers you want to be in control, and as judges you want to be in control too. But here, the only way that these cases were going to settle is if allowed the kind of freedom to take place that typically we try to avoid. And so I talked with the wife, and she would tell me this story about this SOB over here who betrayed her with a tramp, moved in with her, and then how it affected the children and so on and so forth. And she's telling me all of that with tears coming down her face. And after she finishes ventilating, I speak with the husband, and the husband says, you know, Judge, what I did wasn't so bad. But let me tell you what she did. She called all my customers. She told them I was scum. She told them a number of things that really should not be repeated. And now, Judge, I don't have enough money to support myself, let alone my children or my wife, my ex-wife. And so after both of them had fully ventilated, then I was able to say, all right, now do you folks, you're going through a divorce, you're trying to go your separate ways, do you really want to keep meeting each other here in Superior Court on a regular basis over the next 10 years and fighting over your children? Or would you like to make some kind of arrangement so you don't have to see each other again? And then at that point, I could get them both to start thinking from up here. But that cannot happen until they disengage what they are carrying down below the neck. And so, in these types of cases, the family, the neighbor disputes, the homeowner association disputes, on these kinds of cases, keep your eyes really wide open, because very probably there's some issue under the table that you need to recognize and address before you can really move forward.
I don't think, Frank, that you mentioned that we had door prizes too. So we have 2 bottles of wine, 2 things of chocolate, and 4 things of red wine, which will be, what, are you raffling off or giving out to people?
Let's see, we're going to be raffling. Where's the, Gina, you have the,
I
all right, you'll be the one pulling a card out, is what I'm telling you,
do.
okay?
Okay.
And the chocolate, by the way, is the best. Handmade.
And if you ask a really good question, for the first 12 really good questions, I'm going to throw a pink Spalding ball to you. I just happen to have 12 of these left over from my new obsession, which is these pink Spalding balls. So they were the same ones we used to play stickball with in Brooklyn. So I recently came across them. So, but my arm is hurt, so you have to be in the first few rows to ask a question if you want one of these balls. So that's the logistical stuff we got here. Judge Fermat is the historian, the philosopher, the psychologist today, and it's my job to be the realist. So I've got a couple of realistic comments on what he said. First thing he said is, and we're going off an outline prepared by him, by the way. It's the same outline we used a few years ago, and pretty much I disagreed with everything on the outline then, and now I've kind of matured a little bit, so I don't disagree with everything at this point. A few things we'll agree on. I do not believe that our goal as temporary judges, or mediators for that matter, when we're meeting, is peacemaking, as Judge Fermat said. I think our goal as MSC judges is settling the case. And whether that results in peace or not is not really my concern. I want to settle the thing. The same thing with fairness. I often tell the parties too, and I probably shouldn't say this out loud here, but I tell them that the process we're going through has nothing to do with fairness, justice, or equity. And the CP, that's not our goal. We don't know. From our brief sitting with the parties and their counsel in the cafeteria or in the jury room, we don't know what peace or fairness is. And I tell them again, it's nothing to do with fairness or what we're doing. It has to do with smartness. It may not be fair, but it may be smart regardless to set the case. You've all heard that, I'm looking at some of the notes that Judge Fermat has in the outline. The mediation process does not travel in a straight line, and I agree with that. You've all heard the metaphor of the process being referred to as the dance, and I think that's a really good metaphor. Sometimes it's a very slow dance, and in the 3 hours you get, it doesn't progress as fast as it could, and sometimes it's a pretty fast dance. And a lot of us have probably had that experience also, where I'll take one case, we're going to talk about this more when you're handling more than one case, and I'll take one case kind of from 9 o'clock till about 10:30, or about maybe 10:45 or 11, and then there'll be another case waiting around. And sometimes it's work to say, look guys, we've got 45 minutes before we have to go back up here. Let's settle this in 45 minutes. And sometimes that dance, which would have been slow, turns into a really fast dance and works very well. And I think that's kind of like Parkinson's law too. Work expands to fill the time allotted to do it. And my ex-partner, Doug Davidson, who's in the back, and I had that experience. When we did mediations together, if we would have a 3-hour mediation, nothing would happen for about the first 2.5 hours, or 4 hours, nothing would happen in the first 3.5 hours. The last half hour, everything happens. If we had that same group of attorneys, the same case for 8 hours, nothing would happen for the first 7 hours, and everything would happen. So sometimes you can do a very fast dance and move the process along. Just one thing that I once got in trouble for, and that is don't use the word judge pro tem or not pro tem, the word temporary judges. And I say I got in trouble for it. I was in, I don't want to mention names, I was in Judge Nakamura's department. Since he can't do anything bad to me now while he's assistant presiding judge, I guess I can mention his name. So I'm in Judge Nakamura's department and settling a case. We come back in and we're putting it on the record, and he's up on the bench. And I say, he says, he calls the case and I says, who is the temporary judge? And I happen to say, Judge, I was the pro tem on this. So in front of everybody, he lectures me on the record about not using and which is I have teased him about a lot, about how I shouldn't use the term pro tem. So be very careful about that. I think maybe he'd done that because I kept referring to him as the permanent judge instead of the temporary judge. And in terms of most cases being about money, Frank said that most cases are not about money. That's not true. All cases are about money. There's no case that isn't about money. There's a bag of $100 bills that will settle any case on earth. It's a big enough bag. I'm so going to move on to the next part. You're laughing about that? Move on to the next part of your outline. Okay, is that all right?
Go ahead.
Okay. No questions? Nobody wants a great comment? Somebody wants a Spalding stickball at this point? Judge Fairman next has developing, so this is the process we're talking about. Developing an opening statement. I generally do not have an opening statement I make in MSCs. I've got kind of one in mediation, but I don't have them in MSCs. I usually meet with, I almost always go to the cafeteria. Rarely do I go to the jury room or one of the, and never do I want to go to those conference rooms because I can never figure out which way the door opens. And it doesn't matter because I kind of walk in and I know you pull this one in, and it doesn't matter because I'll try to push it to get out, or it's never worked for me. So I go to the cafeteria. I don't have an opening statement. I generally tell the party, I tell counsel I just want to meet with the lawyers first. And I immediately get into the case with them. I don't have the parties there. I always have a justice there because they get really upset if you don't include them in everything. So I say that. The lawyers and the justice. And I look at the plaintiff's counsel and I say, tell me what this case is about. And not almost always, if they have filed a mandatory settlement conference statement or a brief of some kind, they say, well, it's all on my brief. And I say, I just was handed this file. You saw me. I was handed it in the courtroom. We got on the elevator together. I haven't read your brief. Well, just tell me what the case is about. And then I lie to them and say, I'll read your brief as the morning goes along, which I rarely ever do. I explained, eventually I will meet with the parties. I almost always meet with the parties. And then I do have kind of an opening thing or a statement that I make to the parties. And it's pretty much, I explain what an MSC is. I say, and I emphasize the word mandatory, that most judges in Orange County require them and usually it's about a month before trial, sometimes earlier, sometimes even close to the trial. I generally say the judges don't do it. So I was kind of surprised to hear you say, you did a lot of your own settlement conferences?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, well, most of the judges here don't do their own settlement conferences, and they use us temporary judges to do that. And I explained to them temporary judge is an attorney who has experience and been trained in trying to settle cases. I say that in Orange County Superior Court. Was he here when I said that stuff?
You wouldn't know.
Okay, good. Well, welcome then. I have no idea where I was right now.
What was it you said about Judge Nakamura?
The usual wonderful things I say about what I tell the parties with their lawyers present that in Orange County, close to 97% of all civil cases settle before they go to trial, and that there are main reasons for that. I have no idea whether that statistic is accurate, but I use it anyway. Sometimes if I really want to try to push, I say 98%, but usually it's 97%. I heard numbers once before as to how many settle, and I don't think it's quite that high, but that's a really good number to throw out. I tell them there are two main reasons that cases settle. The first is the cost of trying a lawsuit. And sometimes we talk about attorney's fees at that point. Even in contingency fee cases, I point out either they're paying for it by paying hourly or their lawyer is paying for it with his time, and somebody's paying for it. It's a very expensive process to take a case to trial. The second reason that I say in my little speech to the parties, and I give this to both sides, is that the second reason that cases settle is the uncertainty of it all, that there's absolutely no guarantee you're going to win. I tell the plaintiff, there's no guarantee you're going to win, and there's no guarantee if you win you're going to get any amount of money that makes this thing worthwhile whatsoever. And I say, give the same speech to the defendant. Oftentimes I tell defendants that this case is a guaranteed loser for them. And what I mean by that is because of the attorney's fees involved, and they're not going to recover attorney's fees. Even if they do recover attorney's fees, the plaintiff has no money to answer that. They're going to be slapping their lawyer high five in the courtroom or the courthouse hallways after they win the case, but they will have lost $300,000 or $500,000 to get there. So there's no way they can win this case. I also say something to the effect that if we, this is parties, that if we settle the case today, I'm not going to tell them it's a fair settlement. And in fact, it's probably going to be unfair to settle the case. And that has worked miracles for me at some point where I tell the party, I'm not going to tell you it's fair. I'm going to tell you it's smart. It seems to be a smart thing to do, but it's not fair. I've had a couple of cases where I have written out, this settlement is not fair, and I've signed it. And I've handed it to a party, and that's it. And they wanted that. They actually wanted someone to say, okay, I'm going to do this. I don't like it. It's not fair, but you're right. It's smart. I'm going to do it. In terms of the briefs, and I'm looking at Judge Fermat's outline now, it says know the briefs and all that. As we just spoke about, I usually don't read the briefs. And you all know, I mentioned it already, you get handed the file. And I kind of like to take, maybe a survey on that. I'll show my hand. Who actually reads the brief? Okay, never mind that question then. A lot of you do, but a lot of you don't. Also, Bill Lawson, you didn't raise your hand, did you, on that?
No, I do.
Oh, you do? Okay. I rarely read the briefs before we get started. I mean, to me, we're walking down, we're coming down the elevator, and I just get started. When do you guys read them? When do you read the briefs? At what point? Before you go downstairs, or? Bill, speak loudly, Bill.
Before I call the case. And the MSE statements, how long are they?
Yeah.
Every once in a while, you'll get 5 pages from somebody.
But the MSC statements I find are worthless almost all the time.
I still read it, there might be something in there.
Yeah, I've never found anything in one of those.
Where's my Actually, we call them Spaldings.
Yeah, well, okay, you're going to get one, but I hurt my arm. I'm going to try and make it back here, so everybody's
I'll
included.
get it
Watch
later.
out. All right, let's see if I can make that right. I hit this gentleman over the head here. I didn't realize it.
With over 50 witnesses.
With over 50 witnesses. All right, well, maybe I won't try that again. I usually, instead of reading the briefs, as I said, meet with the lawyers and with the adjusters and have the plaintiff's counsel tell me who's suing whom for what the case is about. Let's see, what caucusing with the attorneys, in terms of joint sessions at settlement conferences, I would say I rarely, if ever, have joint sessions. What about that? What about the rest of you? Joint sessions at MSCs, is that something that's, there are a couple of people that have them. Certainly. Bob, you do?
I always do.
At MSCs?
Yeah.
Yes, and I also generally have all parties there, because it's the parties that are gonna settle it, not the lawyers.
Yeah. And you do that from the beginning?
Pardon?
Oh, you do that right at the outset?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I get a lot of looks, and in fact, somebody said, well, that's not the way I handle MSCs, and I was a little bit taken aback, but no, I get the parties in, get them in early, get them in often.
Okay. All right, that is something I don't do. I mean, I rarely have joint sessions at MSCs. Got a question over there?
Well, just a comment, that I think it's a good idea to talk to the attorneys briefly and find out what they prefer. Sometimes they've got discussions, but I think we've all had the experience as attorneys that if you have the wrong people, you may have been making progress before you got to the settlement conference or mediation, and then you get someone who has a formalistic approach and doesn't bring the parties together, but actually ends up driving them apart. So I always assume that there have been some prior discussions. Most of the time I'm wrong, but if there has been, my rule is don't do something that makes it harder to settle tomorrow because of what I've done today.
Bob?
Yeah, if I can make a comment, Richard Augustine, I don't know how many people got it, I assume most of the people in this audience, but gave a link to a survey that was done in the Maryland court, and some of the conclusions there are fascinating. I would strongly recommend it. For example, do parties like joint sessions or not? And I think the answer was yes. And that they have a greater possibility of settling if there are joint sessions.
And I would try to throw you one of these balls out, but I've already hit the gentleman sitting right in front of you, and I don't want to try that again. So you can come up and claim yours for that comment later.
Gene, at this point, would you pull a name out of there, please? Let's see who's lucky today.
Bruce Sandmeyer.
There he is. So does he get his choice?
Yeah, come on up. Grab something out of that table. Anything that you open, you can share, except not the bottle.
So while Bruce is getting that, do some of you get, I'd like to talk to the clients, the litigants, and I said I don't do that in joint session, but I do talk to them. I get resistance sometimes from attorneys who absolutely do not want me to talk to their clients. How about the experience of the rest of you? Do you have that experience, or can you do how do you handle it?
I can't.
Doug?
I just ignore the lawyers.
Ignore them. Sometimes the resistance is stronger than that. They won't bring them over. They won't allow you to.
Well, then I'm going to sit down and talk to them. I mean, I don't really care what the lawyer wants.
Okay.
I always try to talk to the clients with the lawyers present. You have to be careful not to say anything negative about the lawyer and what he's trying to do or what he has said when you're talking to the client.
Yeah,
I'm really pissed off at the lawyer.
And I always do it with the lawyers present too, but sometimes lawyers don't want that to happen. And I agree with you 100%. Never say anything negative about the lawyer as much as you want to. You don't do that. Anybody else have any experiences with lawyers who didn't want to talk to their clients, Suzanne?
I have a point of going down the hall and introducing myself as the settlement judge. I'll be the settlement judge. Good morning, introduce myself, shake everybody's hand, no matter how extended the family may be that is accompanying the actual party. And I've had a number of, and then I do my joint sessions, because I do them in the little attorney room on the hall. And I take the lawyers in and do a joint session with just the lawyers, but I've already met everybody. And so I'm not discussing the case with anyone at that point, just ultimately it's the lawyers in this room. And I've had a number of lawyers really compliment me for introducing myself to their client, because I think they're a little concerned what's going on when I'm huddled with the lawyers behind some closed door somewhere, and the client has no idea what's going on.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea. I do that too. I introduce myself to the parties and all that. Usually, when I walk into the cafeteria, we all go around the table and I introduce myself to everybody, and then I say, I just want to talk to the lawyers to start with, and we'll get the parties involved later. But I think that's a really good idea, to introduce yourself to the... and do you do all of yours in the conference rooms as opposed to the cafeteria?
Unless I'm unable to get the little room on the halls.
All right. Again, we just talked about this, Emmett. I never badmouth a lawyer, regardless how much he or she may do it. And Frank's got his first rule of an MSC mediation is to never get between the lawyer and the client, and that's saying the same thing. And I agree with that 100%. I had a MSC at one point, which I thought the reasonable settlement had been offered. It was a plaintiff's, it was conveyed to plaintiff's counsel, and it was just flat out rejected. And plaintiff's counsel then went to the bathroom and left the plaintiff there alone. The plaintiff came up to me at that point. I'm going to ask you guys what, I probably told this story before, but I'm going to ask you guys what to do about this case. The plaintiff came up to me and said, I think that's a really good settlement, and I want to take it, but my lawyer won't let me take it. And so that was a dilemma for me at that point. So any thoughts on how you would handle that? And that's a real situation, and I ended up talking to counsel, and I said to counsel, I told counsel what the client sent me without the client being present, and I got much resistance and a lot of negativity from counsel from even supposedly talking to his client, which I had one client came up to me and said that. But anybody ever had a situation like that, or how you would handle that? Is that unique to Art?
It's the client's case.
Yeah, but what do you do about it? You know?
Well, you got to convince the lawyer that it's the client's case, and our job as lawyers is to do what's in the best interest of our clients.
All right. So you have that talk with the lawyer. You say, your client came up to me, you're the break, the client says she wants to accept the settlement. The lawyer says it's not a good settlement, we're not accepting it, and that's it. And I had that talk, I said, but isn't it the client's case? They didn't budge at all. I ended up talking to the judge about it. I don't remember how it worked out at that point, but I'm pretty sure the case did not settle.
I had a settlement conference once from the bench in family law where after much work, the parties were $35,000 apart. Couldn't get them to budge. They were going to fight over $35,000. Didn't make any sense. So at that point, a light bulb went off, and I said that we were in the courtroom, and the parties and the lawyers were sitting right here, and I was up there, and I said, how would you feel if we took that $35,000 apart, and if we put it in a college fund for your 3 kids? And then this happened. The 2 parties went like this, and the 2 lawyers went like this. And on the one hand, I think the lawyers understood the clients, and they were trying to do the best thing for the clients. On the other hand, the clients are tired. Clients are tired. It took me years as a young lawyer to find out, but this is something that we all need to be reminded of. The night before your client's deposition, your client didn't sleep. The night before your client's trial, your client didn't sleep. The night before a settlement conference, your client didn't sleep. When an anniversary came up, when the 4th of July came up, Christmas, Thanksgiving, a holiday came up, and everybody in the family is having a good time, your client has this monkey on his or her back that's this pending piece of litigation. Once the case is resolved, they can go back to enjoying life again. But this case and the pendency of this case taints, it stains, it messes up the quality of your client's life until your client has closure. So an elegant, dignified, appropriate settlement of the case early on is wonderful for your client. And sometimes as lawyers we forget that.
Funny you mentioned that, putting the money in the trust fund for the child. I had that exact experience on a very small scale last week. My daughter was being sued in small claims by her ex. And they went into mediation. When I came along, to be her advisor or her support, and they went into mediation, and it was very contentious. And then at one point, my daughter came out and asked me to come in. I went into the mediation room, and the issue at that point was the fact that her ex's door had been scratched by the process server. He wanted her to pay the $250 that it was going to cost him to reclaim his door. And I did exactly that at one. I said, you know what? Why don't I just put $250 in the bank account for my grandson, your son? His response was, it's not about him, it's about my door. So I tried that also. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes that doesn't work. That case ended up settling along different lines, though. Frank mentioned the case. We were at lunch together. I was telling him about the case. I'm in trial now, and I learned another reason to settle cases. Not only is it usually in the client's and the litigant's benefit, it's oftentimes in the lawyer's benefit. In the case that I'm in right now, as I said, we finished our 6th week, I believe it is, in trial, and we have a few more weeks to go. This is a case that's been very nasty and highly litigated for 3 years. Plaintiff's counsel is the most aggressive human being I have ever met, and dealt with that for 3 years. So about halfway through the trial, I broke out in shingles. And my doctor said, by the way, I do not recommend getting shingles in the middle of a trial. That's something I would not recommend. So the doctor, it's healing now, and painful. The doctor said it's the stress of the problem. And Wednesday, so we were in court on Wednesday, and on Wednesday, plaintiff's counsel, the world's most aggressive human being, had a panic attack or something like that, and passed out during the first recess that we took. So there are other reasons. I mean, the reason for, and many years ago, I read an article in the ABA Journal titled, "So You Want to Try Your Case?" And it was the story of an antitrust case in New York that lasted for about 18 months, involved something like 2 dozen or 3 dozen lawyers. And the article is about what happened to those 3 dozen or so lawyers during the 18 months of the trial. The heart attacks, the strokes, the divorces, the psychological breakdowns, the shingles, and everything that happened to those lawyers. Trying a case is extremely hard on the attorneys, and sometimes you sense that, I think, in I think you said that a lot in settlement conferences. You get conferences where you're sure the lawyer wants the case to end. The problems, for all those reasons and others, but the client does not want to do that. Frank, are you going to talk about, would you have listen, clarify, empathize, and affirm at this point, or are we, or I see us in the outline?
Sure, I'll move on to that. In law school, we learn about due process, notice and opportunity to be heard. And it's a very important concept. It's a bedrock concept. But the opportunity to be heard is really not an opportunity to be heard in our system. Parties need to be heard, and our system does not give them that opportunity, because every time they want to tell the story, some lawyer says objection hearsay, objection irrelevant, objection not responsive. They never get an opportunity to be heard. And what I found in family law is that I gave people an opportunity to be heard in a settlement conference, and then the case gets settled. They have their due process at that point, and the case can move forward. So in the appropriate settlement conference, I mean, especially the homeowner association dispute, I think it's really important for you to give the two parties an opportunity to be heard, to vent, get it out. I call it the hairball issue. How many of you have cats? You can give a cat milk, treats, everything in the world, but if it's got a hairball there, the cat doesn't want anything until it gets the hairball out. Once the hairball is out, then life can move forward normally. And I think that the emotional aspect is the hairball issue that keeps a lot of our settlements from moving forward. If you don't have cats, you don't really understand that image. I want to talk a little bit about reflective listening. How many of you are familiar with the concept of reflective listening? How many of you are able to use reflective listening? Okay, just a handful. About 30 years ago, I went on a 6-day retreat at a local Catholic retreat house, and they had a 1-hour segment on reflective listening. And reflective listening is the way that your typical therapist listens to you. They say nothing to you, they just listen. And the reason for that is, all of us in this room, we get up in the morning, we boost ourselves with caffeine, we get out the door, we go 80 miles an hour until lunchtime, we have lunch while working on a case perhaps, maybe at our desks, we get home late in the evening, we drop into bed exhausted, and then we do the next thing the next day. And we've been juggling multiple balls, multiple issues, family, etc., all day long. When did you ever have an opportunity to be fully heard? And when you have an opportunity to be fully heard, something happens. I went to that workshop in 1987, and 3 or 4 days later, I was on an Amtrak. I was on the bench in Fullerton, and I took the Amtrak from San Juan to Fullerton, 40 minutes. And there was a lawyer there that I had seen before, talked with before, and I say, "Susan, how are you doing?" He said, "Not so good, Judge." And so I decided I'm going to listen to this young woman in a reflective listening way. "Not so good. What's going on?" Susan said, "Well, I got this job offer in LA, and it's really exciting, and it pays a lot of money." So in reflective listening, I said, a good job offer in LA, sounds exciting. And then she continues, "Yeah, but my kids and my husband, and would have less time for this nonprofit. But on the other hand, we would get closer to my parents. And then on the other hand," and as she talked, I just simply reflected. I was a mirror. That's what reflecting listening is. You are a mirror. Finally, it's time to get off in Fullerton. She's been talking about 30 minutes. I'm going to get off the train, and she goes on to LA. And I said, well, good luck with your issue. She grabs me by the wrist as I try to get up, and she says, Frank, I want to thank you. That is the wisest advice anyone has ever given me. And at that point, I understood for the first time the power of reflective listening. The power of reflective listening. I never gave her any advice, but I gave this woman this great gift of, for 30 minutes, instead of being fragmented, multitasking, going in multiple directions, to be with her inner scape, with her inscape, if you would, in such a way that what was going on inside could move forward, and it moved forward so much in 30 minutes that she really thought it was a wise decision that was being reached. She wasn't aware that it all came from herself. She thought it came from me. Some people think that these therapists are absolutely brilliant. They're not. They just know how to use reflective listening well. This is something that can be very useful to you in your practices with clients, with children, with grandchildren. When my daughter was 7 years old, we had this Sylmar earthquake, 2 o'clock in the morning of 1992. The house shakes. Everybody, we live in a 2-story home, everybody runs downstairs, and my 7-year-old is absolutely traumatized. She's screaming, and so I pick her up and I talk with her in a reflective listening way. I said, Daddy, Daddy, it shook, and the roof, it might fall down on us, and it might crush us. And I just reflected for about 10 minutes like that. And she was so terrified originally after she stopped talking. I said, you know, sweetheart, we have this big oak table here downstairs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up your sleeping bag and pillow down here so that you don't have to go back upstairs, because she had been a few minutes ago terrified of going back upstairs. And after just 10 minutes of reflective listening, she says to me, oh no, Daddy, that's okay. I can go sleep in my bed. And she did. And it's just enormous, enormous power. This is something that if you have an opportunity to learn, just for your own personal lives, for enrichment of your family, your children, it can really be life-giving to the ones you love. There's a wonderful book that sold over 3 million copies years ago. And if you are parents, grandparents, take the title of this book down. It's How to Talk, How to Listen so your children will talk, and How to Talk so your children will listen. And you can pick it up on Amazon probably for $3.99 used. And I gave a 1-hour presentation some time ago based on that. And let me point out to you what most of us do is we hear. We don't listen. Hearing is what you do with your ears. Listening is a completely different concept. This is the Chinese ideogram. The word ting, which means to listen. And the way they write it up in the Chinese ideogram, you'll see to the left some ears, the upper right, eyes, undivided attention, and finally heart. These are the elements that are required to truly listen. Most people do not truly listen. My daughter hears my granddaughter with her face stuck in this thing doing this kind of stuff. That is not listening. That is hearing. And so the first thing that I do if I'm at an mediation is I take out my telephone, I turn it off, and I put it on the table. That sends a message to them, I'm going to be here with you, 100%. We have habits of hearing only. Try to develop in your work, in the time that you spend with family, the habit of truly listening, not simply hearing. This book has a brilliant, brilliant set of cartoons. And they tell the story of how to truly listen. And I hope that all of you can see in the back, but I'm going to repeat the dialogue here. Little boy approaches Dad, and Dad is watching TV. As you can tell, this is an old book, written about 30 years ago. Can you see the television set has an antenna? Can you see the antenna on the television set? Yeah. And the boy says, Eric punched me. So, Daddy, do you hear me? And the dad, while looking at the TV, says, I can hear you. Go on. So I hit him back. Then he hit me again. Are you listening, Dad? That's the second one. And the dad on the third one right down here, he says, I'm listening to every word. And the little boy says, no, you're not. And the dad says, I can listen and watch the game at the same time. Go on. And the little boy says, forget it. Forget it. Little boy is aware Dad is not listening. If you're multitasking with somebody and if you have a fragmented presence, do you think that they don't know? A 7-year-old boy knows. A 7-year-old boy knows. And so the moral of the story at the bottom is it can be discouraging to try to get through to someone who gives only lip service to listening. I think the quality of your presence is the most important thing that you can bring to a settlement conference, to a mediation, to a family meeting. Okay, let's go to the next one. And this is what Dad should have done. The quality of Dad's presence. Okay, little boy says, Eric punched me. So, Daddy, do you hear me? And then Dad turns off the TV. Notice they have no remote controls in those days. Dad's got to get up to turn it off. So the dad faces the little boy, and the little boy says, so I hit him back. Then he hit me again, even harder. He's mean. And then notice the dad's presence. He's all there. He's simply listening. And then the boy comes up with his own solution at the bottom right. He says, you know what? I'm going to play with Danny from now on. He doesn't go around punching people. Now, how much advice did Dad have to give? 0. The quality of presence was enough. The quality of presence is enough. And you know, very often in a settlement conference, it's sort of like judo. The less energy that you put in, the more effective you are. The more silent you are, the more effective you are. Okay. The moral of the story at the bottom, it's much easier to tell your troubles to a parent who is really listening. Sometimes a sympathetic silence is all that a child needs. Now, some of these concepts can transfer to settlement conferences, to mediation. That's why I'm bringing them here. I wanted to make sure you folks have something that you can really, really take with you today, in addition to my reminding you of what you already know. Here's another instance from that same book. Little girl says, somebody stole my new red pencil. And the mom says, are you sure you didn't lose it? She said, little girl says, I didn't. It was on my desk when I went to the bathroom. And then the mother replies, well, what do you expect if you leave your things lying around? The third square says, you've had things taken before, you know. This isn't the first time. I always tell you, keep your valuables in your desk. The trouble with you is you never listen. And then the fourth one, the little girl says, oh, leave me alone. And mom says, don't be fresh. The little girl who needed to be listened, somebody who needed to be listened, and instead, what did they get? They got criticism. The moral of the story at the bottom, it's hard for a child to think clearly or constructively when someone is questioning, blaming, or advising her. I think in a typical settlement conference, an effective settlement conference officer should speak less than 20% of the time in the early stages. Should mostly listen. Then in the middle stages, maybe you could go to 30, 40% of the time. But it really is very important that you are present and listening early on. Now here's the way that the mom would handle this. This is a reflective listening. Little girl says, somebody stole my new red pencil. And the mom says, oh? And that is enough. The next square, she says, I left it on my desk when I went to the bathroom. Someone took it. And the mom says, The next square, that's the third time I've had my pencil ripped off. And the mom says, And then finally the little girl says, I know. From now on, when I leave the room, I'm going to hide my pencil in my desk. And the mom says, I see. And the moral of the story below, there's a lot of help to be had from a simple, and I see. Words like these, coupled with a caring attitude, are invitations to a child to explore her own thoughts and feelings, and possibly come up with her own solutions. Too often, in settlement conferences, we give advice where all we need to do is give a message of, I hear you. I hear you. That is enough. Go to the next one. No, instead of denying the feeling, the little girl says, my turtle is dead. He was alive this morning. And the dad says, now don't get so upset, honey. And the dad in the second one says, don't cry, it's only a turtle. The third one, the girl's crying, wah, wah. And the dad says, stop that, I'll buy you another turtle. Now that's logic and reason coming up into the event. And now finally the little girl starts crying and says, I don't want another one. And the dad says, nah, you're being unreasonable. Well, that's true. She's not applying reason. Dad is the unreasonable one because he expects a 7-year-old girl who's sad to be applying reason. Right? And so at the bottom, it's strange when we urge a child to push a bad feeling away, however kindly, the child seems to only get more upset. When you have an emotional case with emotional issues, don't push the feelings away. I'm angry. I'm upset. I was betrayed. It's ruined my life. I had to declare bankruptcy. Don't push those things away. Don't say, well, that's not something that we can address today. That's not something that's relevant. Because when you do that, you're really taking away the chances of settling the case. Those feelings need to be addressed, and here's a way to do it. This is what the dad should have done. Little girl says, my turtle is dead. He was alive this morning. Dad says, oh no, what a shock. Help her to be with a feeling, in other words. If somebody in front of you says, I was betrayed by my former partner.
That's his former partner.
I can sense, yes, I can sense your sense of betrayal. I can sense your anger. I can sense your frustration. Whatever it is that you can sense, recognize it. Recognize it. And it helps the client at that point in time become aware of how much his or her case is being driven by emotion as opposed to reason. Okay. So here we go, back again. Little girl says, my turtle is dead. He was alive this morning. Dad says, oh no, what a shock. Little girl says, he was my friend. And the dad helps her to be with her feelings by saying, to lose a friend can hurt. The third square, the little girl says, I taught him to do tricks. And the dad says, you two had fun together. The little girl says, I fed him every day. And dad says, you really cared about that turtle. And they're walking off, probably to the backyard where dad is going to dig a hole in the ground and they're going to have a memorial service over the little turtle. Okay? The comment at the bottom is, parents don't usually give this kind of response to children because they fear that by giving a name to the feeling, they'll make it worse. And it's just the opposite that is true. The child who hears the words for what she is experiencing feels deeply comforted. Someone has acknowledged this inner experience. And it's the same thing in the difficult emotional case. The next door neighbor dispute where, let's see, one of the actual cases we had in our court, neighbor loves his privacy, has a swimming pool, just moved in, and the next door neighbor has a kid with a 8 or 10 foot trampoline, and he is peering constantly over to the other side, and sure enough, litigation ensues, and by the time that you're in court, and the settlement conference, each side has spent $30,000, $40,000. If the homeowners association doesn't also get pulled in as a third party. You're in a situation like that, and the parent says, my home is my castle. I am really pissed off. I have a 6-foot fence, and I've got this kid peering over the fence all the time. What can help move the case forward is your response of helping the person recognize. You're really angry. You're damn right I'm angry. Yes, I can see you're upset. Yes, I'm upset. And give him 5-10 minutes to vent. After he's finally got that hairball out, then he'll realize how much of his case is being driven by emotion. And once he's realized that, then that difficult case will move to settle. All right, and let me give you one more set here.
He's way off script right now, by the way.
Instead of explanation and logic, little boy says, I want my toasty crunchies. Mom says, we don't have any, dear. Little boy says, I want them. And the mom says, I just told you there aren't any in the house. Have some Nifty Krispies. And the little boy says, no. And the mom says, now you're acting like a baby, as he throws a tantrum. The moral of the story, when children want something they can't have, adults usually respond with logical explanations of why they can't have it. Often the harder we explain, the harder they protest. What's the logic of using logic for children in a situation like this? It's illogical. And now here's a way that the mother could have handled it. Boy says, I want my toasty crunches. And so she helps him acknowledge that she hears, I wish we had some in the house for you. Little boy says, I want them. And the mom says, I hear how much you want them. Little boy says, I wish I had them now. And the mom says, I'm with you. I wish I had the magic power to make a magic box appear. And then the little boy says, maybe I'll have some Nifty Krispies. And the mom says, oh, by allowing the child to be heard, those feelings to be heard, something happened. Moral of the story below, sometimes just having someone understand how much you want something makes reality easier to bear. Okay. At this point,
Can I have a few comments before we give out another bottle of wine? And,
go ahead.
Okay. As I said, he's way off script. Reflective listening is not mentioned anywhere in here, but I have kind of a different interpretation of that. And how does that apply to MSCs and what we do? First of all, he said using I do that too, and I'll explain how I do that. I do this, and this is going to probably offend some people, as what I'm going to say now, I think certain people in particular. But I let the parties talk also, but I try to make every litigant and every attorney think I am on their side. I know I'm a neutral and all that, but my goal is to settle the case. And part of it is for me to make them think I'm on their side. Judge Furman said, don't blame. I blame. I blame the other side all the time. No matter which side I'm with, I blame the other side. And I try to develop rapport with each side, and I make them think I sympathize with them. And that seems to work very, very well. And again, I think our job is to settle cases. Our job is not necessarily to enhance anything other than that. Our job is to settle cases. Because I don't think we know what's fair. I mentioned this earlier. We don't know what's fair. We don't know what's right. We don't know what's just. Our job is to try and settle cases. Also, another comment: don't turtles carry salmonella? And with that, that would have been a concern to me anyway. And then before we get into our, I guess we're going to give away a bottle of wine or something at this point. Before we get into that, the thing that you about the parents and how they don't listen, I don't think that's true. That was written up there. I can't read what it says here. I'm trying to read it. And it says that. I think that's the way parents do react to their kids. I don't think they completely ignore the dead turtle or they completely ignore the fight between the kids. So that surprised me to hear that. We're going to go ahead and do another raffle at this point. And maybe it's time for a break. I don't know. We're going to hear about an hour and a half.
Not yet. Why don't you pull two names, Gina?
Brian Selvin. And Leslie Ballard.
All right.
All right, come on up and grab an item.
I'm going for chocolate.
Highly recommended.
Well, I'm gonna take the last bottle of wine.
Nobody wants the red wine.
Any questions, thoughts, or comments about that presentation? Yes.
I hear what you're saying.
Throw the ball, Mike.
I will hand him one when we take our break.
I feel your pain.
It's not that, Judge. That's classic mediation training.
Yeah.
Where what you're trying to do is protect the process, get the parties to voluntarily come to an agreement. But like Mike says, in MSCs, we've got a slightly different goal. At least I do, and that's to settle cases. And sometimes you can't be, the reflective listening and giving people time to vent. All it does is engender their the distance between the parties, and which is often exacerbated by the attorneys basically saying, "You're absolutely right. I'm not getting paid. If this thing settles." I have a tendency to kind of lean to Mike's sort of realistic approach, that sometimes you have to kind of force yourself into the equation to get results, to settle cases. Not on your terms. Ultimately, it's going to be on the party's terms. But basically, sometimes to tell the people, I hear what you're saying, it's not relevant.
Yeah.
And you have to do it in short course, because, I offer my services. If I can't get it done in the morning, I'm glad, sometimes to come back in the afternoon. I'm glad if you can get the judge to agree and come back and do a continued MSC or something like that. But more often than not, like, again, I don't want to just point to what Mike says. Maybe I've taken too much training from him. But the reality is that, the lawyers really do dictate the dance. And that first hour is really nothing. And then you can pretty much tell within the first hour whether or not you're going to settle the case, if there's going to be movement, if it's going to be able to set into a way that you can say, hey, look, we can't settle it today. We're not keeping you guys from picking this up again on your own before the trial and trying to get it done. But that reflective listening and that sort of mediation approach that MSCs, more often than not, I've noticed, it kind of solidifies the parties' positions and gets it harder to get them to settle. So, and I think maybe perhaps it's the lack of a skill set that I have to be able to, okay, now I'm listening to you, I hear you. Now, here are some ways to come closer, which is ultimately the goal.
And what you say is absolutely correct. I think the difference is that you have to use the proper tools. Each case is different. And you have some cases where you can very quickly analyze and you know what the dance is going to be, and the demand is a certain amount, the offer is a certain amount, and you know that it's going to settle within a certain range, and you know how that dance is going to play. And there are other cases where you need a different set of tools. A plumber doesn't use the electrician's tools, they won't work. And a jeweler uses special kinds of tools for a special type of endeavor. And likewise, for different cases, we bring different kinds of tools. And these kinds of tools that I'm showing you here, these are the tools for the case where emotion is so stuck in there.
I think, oh, I'm sorry.
The homeowner association dispute, the neighbor dispute, the family law cases, the sibling disputes over business that went wrong, etc. And this approach takes longer. In mediation, we have more time for that. In settlement conference context, sometimes the judge gives you what, 2 cases, 3 cases in the morning? 5? Somebody said 5? You don't have time for this nonsense. You really don't have time for this. But if you have a case that has these kinds of elements, this lets you know why you failed. And you didn't fail. They failed. But the settlement conference was just never going to get anything done. Another hand back there.
Yeah, in listening to this, I was thinking it's hard to do all of this when you have 3 cases in 3 hours. But there's something you can always do. And I do it a little differently than Mike. I don't tell them that you're right, the other side's wrong. But I always tell the defendant, particularly in a personal injury case, I'm sorry you were hurt. And that has nothing to do with who's going to win or lose the lawsuit. But you can always empathize with an injured party, or say, I can see that you felt wrong, and I can see a surprise on the party's face when I do it, and the lawyer is also sometimes pretty surprised. And it also shows you're paying attention. You're not just trying to get a number off a docket. You're actually involved with their problem.
I think I use the same tools, I just use them differently. I mean, I say, I hear you, I hear you, and you're 100% correct, and it's the other guy's fault. And then that point is, and this isn't fair, but let's see if we can do something smart about it now. Let's see if we can get you out of this situation. And it's his fault, you're right, I agree with that, but let's see if we can get you out of this situation in a way that makes sense. And I'm not sure I do anything different in settlement conferences than I do in mediation, other than it's a shorter timeline in the settlement conferences. But I think I use the same approach. And for me, it works. And a lot of this, of course, is personality and person dependent. You use what works for you.
Okay, yes.
What's the role of evaluative commentary in your estimation?
I'm sorry, would you stand up?
What's the role of the evaluative commentary, the evaluative process?
As
The role.
as opposed to facilitating.
Comment what to do, because in my experience of the 4 people in the room, at least one of them wants to know if they're going to win. And they're desperate for somebody to tell them in the middle.
Yeah.
And so rather than see the elephant sitting there, I'm trying to figure out, where does that get on the table?
I've heard Frank's approach on that about whether he talked about, you tried this case 10 times, he talks about how many times you think you're going to win it, and reflects that back on them, which is good. But I mean, Dale, I think I try to do that. We talk about that. We talk about, I think you got a pretty good chance of winning, but that's no guarantee you're going to win. I mean, yeah, I think you got some good, good defenses here, but you know how difficult it is to take that and guarantee a win. I mean, I engage in that kind of process with them, give kind of an honest evaluation of that. They always have divided, at least in most of the training I've had, mediation techniques into evaluative versus facilitative. And I don't think I've ever been involved in a mediation or settlement conference as a facilitator. I think I'm always an evaluator, and I'm always Sometimes I'm making up stuff on the fly as to my evaluation, but I'm always evaluating and giving people my opinions. And I don't know, Frank, I imagine your approach is different than that.
I try to tailor it to the case. And in a situation like that, I'll ask the lawyer, if this case were to be tried 10 times, how many times do you think you win it? And the plaintiff says, oh, I win it 7 or 8 out of 10 times. And then I'll ask the defense, how many times do you think you'll win this case, tried 10 times? And he says, you know what the answer is? 7 or 8 out of 10 times. And they both feel they're going to win it 7 or 8 out of 10 times. And so I said, you know, and then I get both of them together and say, you know, I spoke with both of you. Both of you feel like you get it 7, win it 7, 8 out of 10 times. And both of you guys here are like the jockeys at Santa Anita. Both of you know you're going to win, but only one of you is going to win. And there's going to be some chance involved. And the chance is, what jury do we pick? Do we pick the Mother Teresa jury, or do we pick the other jury at the other extreme? And I had multiple cases, I mean many cases, I'm sure many of you did. Several cases after you saw the faces of the jury you have just picked. I mean, that happened 8, 9, 10 times in my judicial career. Because you know at that point that, you know, the cards you've been dealt aren't really good cards. Okay. Why don't we take a break at this point? Gina, we have 10 or 15 minutes?
I think it's 15 minutes.
15 minutes? Okay, take 15. Let's start it again. All right, I just put out at the back table some flyers for some materials from Pepperdine Law School or Strauss Institute. They've got mediation training programs that are excellent. And I try to get out there every year. I've done 5 programs over there over the years, and every year they bring something new to me, something that I need to be reminded of. Last month I went to a program called Preventing Bad Settlement Decisions and Impasse, a 2-day program. And they have, every June, they will do about 12 or 15 different courses on different topics related to mediation settlement conferences. So if any of you want to build up your skills in that arena, go ahead and grab some of that information on your way out. We didn't pass those out at the beginning because unfortunately I didn't bring enough for everybody. So if you get that kind of literature from the Strauss Institute, leave it behind. Okay.
Yeah, in terms of training, I just spoke to a lawyer here who is new to the mediation, or the the temporary judge panel. And one thing that I've had a lot of, and I think is very helpful, is for people to shadow me or shadow the rest of you. A lot of experience. So if you're new to the panel, there are plenty of people on the panel who don't mind you coming along and tagging along at settlement conferences, and you're going to learn a lot doing that. And the other thing which I think is very interesting in that is, you know, I think my techniques are just the greatest, and I'm the best mediator in the world. When you go and sit with someone else, I had that experience very recently. I told you I was with my daughter in small claims court, and I sit as a small claims judge, temporary judge also, and I think I am just the coolest temporary judge there is. So I sat in and watched another judge do the calendar. I thought this guy was really good. I thought he was better than I, and I learned a lot doing that. So there's a lot to be learned from each of us, and there's a lot of different approaches that work very well. So again, if you're new to the panel and you want to, there are plenty of people who wouldn't mind sitting in on the settlement conferences.
Okay, I'd be on the bench and I'd be doing a settlement conference and the conference was not successful. Then later on I'd sort of rehash it. What happened? What did I do? What did I miss? And so I thought I'd develop for myself a little sheet. What is it that I missed that I could, when a case got stuck, I could just go and kind of like a little cheat sheet that I could look up, 3x5 cards. And my very first one that I developed that was very useful to me, I developed it when I was in family law, and it had 4 words on it. Listen, clarify, empathize, affirm. Whenever I was stuck in a case, I thought that those items were important, especially when I was addressing the parties directly. I'm not talking about the case where I'm talking with the lawyers directly. I'm talking about the case where I'm talking with the parties directly. I think the parties, before you can have credibility with them, they got to know that you're fully listening to them. The element of clarify, you need to describe areas of conflict, let them know that you understand them, paraphrase what they're saying. If they say that the size of a pension plan is $200,000, you clarify by saying, is it both? Each plan is $200,000, or is it a total of $200,000 both plans? By clarifying, you let the party know, I'm listening to you, I understand your case. Empathize, without judging or blaming or placing fault. It's important that you understand, that the client understands that you hear, also that you hear what's going on inside. And if it's anger, empathize with that anger, that you hear it, and I would feel angry too. And then finally affirm. Whatever they say that is correct, accurate, reasonable. I believe in the justice system. They say I believe in the justice system too, which is that it's more expensive. It's more expensive than it should be. And then I might use that Victor Hugo quote, that when you can be ruined by winning a case. And so those were the four elements of my very first cheat sheet. After that, I expanded it a little bit, perhaps too long. And that way, when I'm stuck in a case, it's just not moving forward. What is it that's not moving forward? Let me look at my sheet, see if there's something that I have missed.
What have you added to it?
That's secret, that'll cost you.
Look, it's already cost.
All right. Finally, I want to point out to you, there's a book called Insights on Leadership. It's a series of essays. And in it is an article on John Woolman's method for disentangling conflict. And I thought that it had some very useful points, and it's a 4-point approach. This is a case where it's impossible to settle. And yet both sides absolutely want to settle, but the views are very different. The approaches are very different. And so what the John Woolman approach is 4 steps. 1, remind everyone that there is a we relationship, not a me against you relationship, but rather a we relationship. We, both sides, want to disengage. We, both sides, need to disengage. We, both sides, believe in justice and the justice system and the jury system. We have a number of things in common. The second aspect, it has to be respectful. And if there's animosity there, it's not going to work. And the settlement officer needs to make sure that the respect stays in. If you allow attacks, emotional attacks, invective, that's just not going to work. The third step is you become somewhat vulnerable. You say, folks, I have used all my skills, all my knowledge, all my experience, and I can't help you. I need your help. And then at that point, the lawyers and the parties sort of, if they buy on, if they buy in, then they start helping to disentangle and coming up with ideas. And the 4th step is seeking the creative solution. But for this step, this approach to work, number 1, they got to remain respectful. 2, they really have to believe you. And you say, I have tried this and this and this and this, and the case is not settled. And the plaintiff is taking this position, and you know what? the plaintiff. It's not totally unreasonable. And the defense takes this position, you know what, the defense is not totally unreasonable. But going to trial is a mutual catastrophe. We need to disengage. Help me to disengage. Let's talk to disengage. And if they buy on, the dynamic changes completely. And now it's a team approach at settling instead of the typical caucus with opposite sides. So this is something to remember.
Finally, Frank, you said something I agree with here, and I like, and that is the I need your help approach. I've run out of things to do, I need your help, because I think that's very manipulative, and which is my whole approach to the thing, so I like that.
Okay. And then, and then ask also, what do you see as other choices, other options, if we don't settle this case? You know what's going to happen if this case gets tried. Okay.
Question?
Yes.
How much of this applies to an insurance company adjuster?
That deserves a ball. But
You know,
I'm not throwing it.
not typically, not typically. I did have one case where this insurance company and the dynamics of the case were such that each time a case we solved, it was like a Hydra monster. It sprouted 2 more heads of litigation. And each time you click that one off, it sprouted 2 more heads of litigation. And I remember talking with the adjuster in that case, I have never in my life felt sorry for an insurance company. In this particular case, I really feel sorry for this insurance company. And they helped me disentangle it, and they paid, in 7 figures. Yeah, so it can happen. It's rare with insurance companies. Right?
Well, we have 316 now?
Yeah, go to 316.
Okay, first just a couple more comments on, because Judge Kermack's approach is sort of the kumbaya approach to mediation and settlement, and that's one that I'm not very good at, but I did look up the meaning of kumbaya in Wikipedia, fond of all knowledge, and so I'm going to quote here. The song was originally associated with human and spiritual unity, closeness, and compassion, and it still is. But more recently, it is also cited or alluded to in satirical or cynical ways, which suggest false moralizing, hypocrisy, or naively optimistic views of the world and human nature. And that's, I guess that's how I feel. I don't have the naively optimistic view, I have the opposite view of that. So that approach doesn't necessarily work for me. We're going to talk.
Let me tell you a little story here. I think you're on target without knowing it.
Every once in a while.
I was in family law for 7.5 years, and after 5.5 years as supervising judge in family law, I was leaving, and the word got out that my replacement was going to be a supervising judge who had been a colonel in the Marine Corps. And so I approach a group of lawyers, and they're talking, and they say, "Oh no, we're going to go from kumbaya to the colonel." And that was the word in family law, from kumbaya to the colonel. Go ahead.
We're going to talk about Rule 316, and there are 2 versions of it that I think have been handed out. And one is the Rule 316, and the other is my reaction to that rule, my redacted and commentary version of 316. And we worked this over pretty well. Tom Weaver, I know Tom Weaver is here, and Tom Cummings is here, and with Judge Stafford, we talked a lot about Rule 316 at the ADR meeting, ADR section meeting in January. So I know Tom and Tom are both experts in all of this stuff, and they can join in any time on this. First of all, I want to do another hand count here. If it wasn't for getting paid, take money out of the equation for the moment, how many of you prefer doing MSCs to mediations? Anybody? I mean, I do, but only a couple of us. All right, somebody's hand in the back. I don't know who that hand came up there. I see one back there. Wait. Oh, Doug. Okay, my former partner, Doug. I don't know, Doug, why do you prefer MSCs to mediation? Again, I know you like getting paid because I was your partner.
Which I never did. I prefer it because I think it's more formal
I think there's something to be said about having to come to the courtroom, seeing the bench up there and the seal of the state and the flags and all that stuff. I think it has a level of solemnity to it that you don't have it when you do mediation in a court reporter's office at some random place somewhere around the county. I think I sort of know where this is headed because of the topic of Rule 316. As a temporary judge, you have the power to do things that you don't as a mediator. You know, a mediator, if you're some kind of a case where there's an incentive adjuster, the adjuster might show up and, they're sort of locked in their position. It's been roundtabled in the committee, and the committee evaluates the X amount of dollars, but there's nobody that can go over it, but they can make a few phone calls. Well, if you're in a settlement conference, you say, fine, we're going to continue for 2 weeks. The person you're going to call on the phone to get the position authority, I want him or her out here in 2 weeks, I guess, or whatever. So I think it's more conducive to settling cases.
All right, and that's exactly the point I was making. Anybody else prefer MSCs to doing mediations? Not many people. There's another good one. How about you? Any other different reasons?
Well, I mean, the affiliated retired 2 years ago, but practiced 45 years, 35 of which included mediation and some arbitration. Now I affiliate with a mediation arbitration company. But, the whole business of arbitrating, you make a date, you make a friend for a day, and an enemy for life. And very procedural to the extent you got a final, assuming it's not the real game is an arbitration agreement, and now the parties select you as a neutral. Your verdict is final. There's no appeal. There's nowhere to go. And I don't particularly enjoy that responsibility, but it's there in an arbitration setting. But mediation, I usually say I'm successful in 8% of these mediation cases, except for Mercury Insurance. I say that only because the head lawyer is a close friend of Mercury. He agrees. I was going to say, while I'm talking, I was going to say that to have the parties together at the beginning and explain the process to the parties, particularly the adjuster doesn't need to be lectured to, but oftentimes the plaintiff has not been told exactly what's going to happen. The concept of confidentiality is perhaps not even explained. And I then seek the permission of the party plaintiff to talk to her or his lawyer without her presence. And not that we're going to keep any secrets, all offers have to be communicated, but there's some legal mumbo jumbo. And inevitably, they say, okay. So a lot of the progress is made by talking to the lawyer. You got to recommend X or Y. And we're certainly not going to resolve without your recommendation. I don't think there's an ethical way of separating the adjuster from the lawyer. I don't separate them. But the plaintiff and his or her lawyer oftentimes are separated when I want a heart-to-heart talk to the lawyer. And much of the work is done in that discussion, but it starts out together and it ends together. Hopefully we're going in the right track. But if I may say, today is one of my volunteer days in one of the departments. Something happened that has never happened to me in 35 years of mediating cases. That is, when I asked the defendant lawyer, where's your client? It's a boyfriend-girlfriend lawsuit. He's in the first floor waiting. And I said, well, bring him up here. I can't. There's a restraining order against him that he has to stay within beyond 200 yards of the girlfriend. And if he goes to this floor, he's violating that, and the other lawyer will not waive it. So I end up by going onto the floor that he could talk to me on, and I'm really running up and down. I resolved the case by making sure I was talking to both parties eventually, but that has never happened in my mediation career. But I made it work with the cooperation of clerks in one department and clerks in another.
Yeah, I like your idea of actually getting the permission of the client to speak to the lawyer alone. I don't do it that way, but I think that's a good idea. I like that one. So, we all want to. Bill, hang on a second. So I want to just remind you that you had your hand up here. And you get a pink ball for that one, by the way, but I'm definitely not throwing it.
Don't throw it.
I'm definitely not going to do that. I had that exact experience also. I had a case where a child who had been molested or allegedly molested by her teacher many, many years ago was now suing. She turned 18 and within the statute of limitations, she was suing the teacher. And the event had happened maybe 10 years earlier than that, and the teacher had served time in jail. And so this teacher's being sued now, I don't remember what insurance representation or whatever was going on at that point. The teacher's being represented. The lawyer said she's not there. She's not in the cafeteria. She's not on the floor. She's on the fourth floor, the second floor, something like that. Because there's the same thing. There's a restraining order in effect. So I had to do the same thing. I went between floors to talk to him. And I spoke with the teacher who told me she did, with her lawyer present, she did not do this. She was convicted wrongly. This whole thing is unfair to her and all this. And that's one of the very first times, a long time ago, but one of the very first times for her. And I told her, this is not fair. We're not talking about fairness here. I'm not going to tell you if you settle up and pay this child that it's going to be fair. And she broke down crying. She said, everybody else has told me it's fair that I do this, and I don't think it's fair. I didn't do anything wrong. You're the first person to ever tell me that it's not fair that I do this. We settled the case. She was able to settle it at that point. But I had an exact situation you're talking about. So, Bill, you've got the question.
Yes, sir. It's my feeling that the MSC in the courthouse has much more solemnity and authority than the mediation. Personally, I like to have the MSCs in the jury room. I tell them, if the case goes to trial, this is where the jury is going to be, and I have the judge outside if I need to talk to him or anybody else. I think it's much more forceful. I think the MSCs are usually closer to trial. Also, I think you have more chance of settling the case than mediation.
Okay, well, that's interesting. I like the pump up of in the cafeteria, like being in the cafeteria, and seeing all you guys doing all your magic while I'm waiting to get everybody and all that stuff. And I definitely don't do it in the jury room, but that's a point I'd never considered about the solemnity part of that.
Why don't you do it in the jury room? What's wrong with the jury room?
I like being in the cafeteria. Just to me, the activity there seems to move things along, and I point out to the litigants all the other cases that are being settled and work on that at that point. It's just a personal preference kind of deal. I prefer not to be in the quiet solitude, I guess, of the jury room, and I prefer to be in the busy, buzzing cafeteria. That's a personal choice.
In a situation like that where you've got a restraining order, that's ridiculous that you have to stay floors away. This is a case that's going to go to trial, and when they go to trial, they're not going to be with a video link 200 yards away. They're going to be in the same courtroom, just a few feet away from each other. So what you do is you talk to the judge in charge of the particular department, and have the judge write a 2-sentence minute order that they are required and they are ordered to be within 50 feet of each other, but no closer than 50 feet of each other in a courtroom, for example, separate corners of the courtroom. But it's absolutely ridiculous to expect you to travel 200 yards back and forth all morning long.
Yeah, I charge for mileage.
And Frank, I thought about that in the case I had with the child molestation drug. I said, I'm going to order her to come up here. But she felt so uncomfortable about it, no matter what I was going to say, that I figured I had a better chance of resolving the case if I did that traveling. So in that case, I did that. But you're right, if it goes to trial, they're going to be in the same courtroom and all that. So I'll answer my own question as to why I do like MSCs. I like getting paid when I do mediation. I will definitely state that. But when I'm doing MSCs, I like it mostly for the reason I think Doug said, since we were partners or associates for 40-some years, he pretty much knows every thought in my brain at this point. And that's a scary thought right there. But at any rate, I like the power aspect of it. I can boss people around at MSCs, and I can't boss them around at mediation. of course I'm overstating that, and hopefully Judge Knopper is not standing back there as I say that at this point, but I do like that because and the reason I can boss them around is, again, is because, or not again, is because of Rule 316, Rule 316, because unlike a mediation, when we go to mediation, there are no particular rules that they have to follow. Sometimes they're ordered to mediation, or the court, they got a return date, they have to complete a mediation, and about the only power you have is to report back to the court and say, well, they didn't show up, and therefore we couldn't do it. But at the MSC, there are specific rules, and I think the rules in Rule 316 are really, really good. And I think that most times, the lawyers who are coming to mediations do not read Rule 316, The MSCs do not read Rule 316, and there's just a lot of non-compliance with the rules. So I've got my hyperbolic comments on 316, and maybe we can go through. And this, I've used this before, and again, we did it in January. One of the first things with Rule 316 is who's supposed to be there in terms of lawyers and in terms of, and if any of you guys want to comment on this, feel free, because I know you've all had these experiences that I'm going to talk about now and handle them in different ways. The right lawyers there. Very often the right lawyers are not there. It's supposed to be the attorney who will try the case, or an attorney who's completely familiar with all the aspects of it and has full authority. That often is not the case. And I kind of make a joke here, because I hear it all the time. Well, I ask, and you can sense that right away when you got that. You know when you don't have the right attorney there. So I'll ask, where's Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so? Or how come she is not here today? Well, she's engaged. You hear that all the time. They're engaged. Okay, well, and then I kind of try to pursue it. Well, what does that mean, engaged? Well, and oftentimes that doesn't mean she's in trial, or he's in trial. It means she's on vacation, or it means she's got meeting with clients. But I really try to pursue that, and I use that as leverage. If I get stuck in a point where the case isn't settling, and I think it should settle. I mean, they're close enough, and there just seems to be some sort of unnatural resistance to it. I can use that as leverage. I say, you know what? Maybe we just got to continue this thing and make Mr. So-and-so come here. Oh no, he can't come here because he's going to be engaged at that point. But I use that, I guess, to my advantage in trying to move the case towards settlement. And I got a couple of rules how you can tell when the right attorney is not there. And again, if the bar number is over about 500,000, you know it's not the right attorney there. If they're texting nonstop, and that it used to be in the old days before cell phones and smartphones, you could tell when it wasn't the right attorney. So we used to have to run out to the payphone in the hallway and call somebody. And then it was cell phones, so they had to, whether to do. Well, my client and I are going to go talk about that. Then they're on the phone, Now it's just they sit there, especially the young lawyers, they're going like this while you're talking to them. They're texting somebody, and they're getting immediate responses from somebody who's not there. And in the mediation training I took, and Doug and I took it at a program at UCI, which I don't think they have anymore. Well, one of the few things I learned from that program is that the hardest person to settle with is the person who's not in the room. And and we've all experienced that. It's always the spouse who isn't there, or the partner who isn't there, or somebody who isn't there who's done, no way we're going to pay that kind of money after you've worked them. And so I often do that. I often order people back. Now, it depends on your experience doing it, it depends on your personality, it depends on the lawyers you're working with, and it depends to a large extent whose courtroom you're in, which judges. There's some of the judges here that will let you do that. You don't even have to come in and ask them for permission. For some of them, you come in and ask them about it, and they say, if you think so, you think they should be there. And some of them take that very, very seriously, and they'll call the parties in, and they'll make an order that so-and-so and so's got to be there. I do that a lot on my own, by the way. I talk to the clerks generally. I say, we're going to continue this thing. We're going to continue it until about this date, and we're going to order that everybody must be in full compliance with Rule 316. I always include that in there. And in this particular case, that means that adjuster so-and-so, we'll figure out justice for a second, that attorney so-and-so has to be here that day. One of the great powers of that is how many cases settle because of that, because that attorney doesn't want to show up, and they end up bridging that $3,000 gap, or whatever they are at that point. Okay, so in terms of attorneys being there, that's some of the things you run into. The next question is what parties need to be there, and generally, in my experience, you have plaintiffs there. Plaintiffs generally show up, but occasionally you don't. And almost always, when I don't have a plaintiff show up, the lawyer for the plaintiff will tell me, well, I have full authority. And I never know what that means, but they say, I have full authority. And again, that's a thing that troubles me also, and I think that's interfering with the settlement of the case. I'll order them back again. I don't mind ordering them back and say, you're going to come back and plaintiff so-and-so is going to be here. Oftentimes, we'll have a whole bunch of separate entities, and kind of one of them is the lead entity, but the others actually have different ownership and different officers. I've had that many times where you have one of 5 different plaintiffs or 5 different defendants present, and I've continued those cases with the order that we need a live body, someone with full authority from each one of those plaintiffs to be here. And again, most of the judges go back and that. I'll mention judges' names again because I want to. One of my favorite judges to do MSCs for, he's now retired, was Bill Monroe. Because I know a lot of you know Bill Monroe, William M. Monroe, and Judge Monroe would make just the most wonderful orders if somebody crossed you in MSC. You just had to go back to him and tell, well, you know, this guy, I think should have been here, Judge, and he wasn't here. And he'd take the bench, and it was colorful and wonderful to watch. And I love Bill Monroe, but I thought he was excellent in that enforcement. A lot of other judges who I think are really, really good at that. Judge Chaffee is very supportive of that kind of stuff too. If you think you need parties there, Judge Chaffee will. Emmett, you're shaking hands. So you had that trick with Judge Chaffee?
I had an attorney who, at a settlement, his clients were in the cafeteria. And I said, you know, I need your clients up here. And he refused.
Yeah.
So I said, I will relay everything to my client, which is, you know, complete BS. Because he'll filter it and then might relay some of it. And I told Judge Chaffee, he said, look, I can't do it without the clients actually being here because I feel I have to talk to them or they will never feel that they got their chance to speak. And Chaffee took the bench, told the lawyer, you will go down, you will get your thing, or you will go to jail.
But that's a good order. I like that.
Yeah, it was a good order. More than I could have done.
Yeah, Judge Chaffee I've had lawyers occasionally I had one, talking about just a war story with Judge Chaffee, I had one where it turned out that I think it was the defendant. The defendant was the guy who put the security system in my house. And he was never a client of mine, but he was a client of a very good friend of mine, a deceased lawyer who was wonderful, Charles Garrity, and a lot of you guys probably knew Chuck Garrity. He was a client of Chuck Garrity, and Chuck Garrity was going to be as an alarm guy. I had ended up representing his ex-wife. So she was, this defendant's ex-wife was my client. The plaintiff was a lawyer he was suing, and a good friend of my partner, Doug Davidson, you don't remember this case, I'm sure, but a lawyer who we had used on appeal to do some appellate work for us. And so I disclosed all that up front. I said, by the way, Mr. So-and-so, he put the alarm system in my house, my 3 houses that I've had since I first met him, and his wife was a client of mine. I still have contact with her. And also, you should know that the lawyer on the other side, everybody agreed to that. But at one point, the defendant got I disclosed all that. The defendant got very, very upset with that and was accusing me of bias. I was biased in favor of the lawyer and all that. And his lawyer was extremely nasty to me about that. And so I went back up to Judge Chaffee and said, this is what the situation I had. He didn't say quite the same things, but he said some really nice things that I like to hear him saying when he talked about that. But there are some of those judges who are just excellent. Frank, I don't know, when we did MSCs for you in the mortgage, the mortgage refinance cases, you took a very, very active role in that. But what do you think about the stuff we're talking about, where you go to the judge and you ask for help on things like that?
Early on, I had, before I went to family law, I had a sheet that my clerk would show to the attorneys, and if the case did not settle, I'd want to talk with the attorney, with the settlement officer, and find out why. How far apart are they? What would it take to settle the case? And is this a case that I should have a further settlement conference on the Monday of trial, or is this a case that absolutely has to be tried? Don't waste my time. And if there's anything that, like these kinds of things that interfere with the process, I wanted to cut through so that you could have a meaningful settlement conference. And if you needed somebody ordered to come back the following Friday, I ordered that somebody to come back the following Friday. I really strongly believe that one of the most important things for people to get quality justice is a successful settlement conference. And so I really want to do everything possible to make sure it went well. As a matter of fact, the survey sheet that you're going to be filling out at the back, I'd like you to fill out some additional language I'll put up here. And it'll say, what can the court or the judge do to help you improve your success and satisfaction as a settlement officer? And just fill it out anonymously, and we'll give these results over to the supervising judge of civil. And it may be that if you point some things out, the lack of cooperation that you have in some cases, or the creative cooperation that you have from other judges in other cases, point it out, and then I can point it out to the supervising judge, and the supervising judge can take it up with the judges at a judges meeting.
One judge I think who does a really good job with the pro tems, the temporary judges, is Judge Horn. He brings in, so Emmett and I apparently follow each other around, those are the same judges. He does a very good job. I'll make a note here, something else I want to talk about, because that'll be done. He does a very good job. He brings you to counsel, and then you go out and sit in the courtroom, and he introduces you, and he talks to the litigants and to the attorneys and said, this is Judge Balmages, this is Judge whoever, and they're going to help me out today in trying to settle your case. And he basically said, you're to treat him with the same respect you treat me, and you're going to go down to the cafeteria and try and settle the case. I think he does a very good job. Anybody else want to comment on any judges that they think that do a really good job in terms of the...
Well, the one thing that, there are judges I've done settlement conferences for 10, 15, and I wouldn't recognize them if I ran into them in the hall.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know what they look like. I've never been invited into their chambers. They've never said thank you. You know, it baffles me why we're volunteering our time. And, you know, you got some like Lucas and mostly the older judges. You know, Lucas and DeCesar.
I mean Lewis, not Lewis.
Lewis,
yeah.
Lewis and DeCesar and Horn, who, you know, really take the time to make the effort, and others who just don't seem to care.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%. When I go to courtroom and I never get to see the judge that I'm helping out, it's kind of an odd thing there. Anybody, I think somebody else. Bob, did you have your hand up too?
Yeah, and I also agree about Judge Lewis, that he's a good judge to go to. And you made a kind of strange comment that you make these orders rather than the judge. You know, obviously we're a judge, but I mean, you know, people are really going to listen to you saying, well, no, you don't have settlement authority. Have you read Section 664.6 of the California Code of Civil Procedure? It's got to be in writing or orally before the court with all people present. And you're not the party, so you can't settle this case. You know, and I've taken that to Judge Lewis on more than one occasion, and he's ordered him into court. But I would feel very reluctant to do that. And with respect to the other side of the paper, you know, I'll echo what Evan has to say, that a lot of times the judges just aren't there. I mean, I've conducted settlement conferences for judges I've never met. And, you know, in a situation where somebody, I think, is violating the rules, you know, and not have settlement authority, you know, I had one in which the settlement authority was $1,000 over the last offer made by the insurance company. And it just, you know, incensed me. I would have liked to have had the judge there to explain to him, you got to bring somebody with authority. And they can't be in Hartford because there's a 3-hour time difference and they're off on a Friday afternoon. And I think Judge Chafee probably is number one when it comes to acknowledging the temporary judges, calls them by name, calls them judge. I mean, that's kind of always, you know, Judge Merrick. Okay. And I think he does an excellent job.
All right, to respond to your point about me making the orders, generally I prefer to have the judge make the orders. Or lots of times I'll go back and I'll speak with Chaffee or with one of the other judges in the situation, and I said, I recommend you order this, this, and this, and the judge will say, go do it. And so I get I've had that experience a lot. Other times, I'll talk to the clerk and say, this judge who I've never met before, here today, oh no, she's not here, he's not here, whatever. So here's what I'd like to do, go ahead and do it. So I get, rarely will I do it, but I'll take the litigants or the lawyer sometime and say, look, I'm going to recommend to Judge Chaffee or somebody that he order you back and he order your senior partner, the guy who's actually going to try this case and knows something about it back on that date. And they're going to complain about it and all that. I said, my guess is, my experience with Judge Chaffee is, he's probably going to do that if I recommend that. So, and then I'll go up and, and with Chaffee he almost always will do that for you. But I make orders, but Bob, I do realize that I am a pro temp.
You're a temporary judge.
I use that word purposely, obviously, but I realize I'm a temporary judge. But as that temporary judge, we have the power to make that order at that point. But I don't do it without checking with the judge first, or at least the clerk first, or it's a judge that I have a really long-established relationship with, and I know that, and that's rare. Almost always I get to do that. I'll tell you one more Chaffee story. I had a case where a municipality was defendant, and the municipality had, and they were really hanging up this case in a very, I don't even remember why, but very arbitrary and trivial way. It's one of those cases where they were $1,000 apart, or whatever it was, and they weren't going to do this. And I went back and told Chaffee, and he ordered the entire city council to do that. Now, that violates the whatever act, what is the act? The Brown Act. That violates the Brown Act. And I said, Judge, because I told that, and actually, I'm not going to mention the law firm that filed because there's some representatives of it here at the point representing this municipality, but when I told them what I was going to suggest, immediately, that was all Brown. We can't do that. We can't have 3 of them in the same room at the same time without, all this kind of stuff. But Chaffee ordered it, and again, that worked wonders in settling the case. So, all right.
I wonder how the Brown Act applies. Can't they make an executive session if it involves litigation?
It has to do with notice. You can't order the council in. I don't recommend it. The reason being is, most politicians, that's how I represent politicians, that's the worst way to reduce a settlement. Imagine Todd Spitzer being ordered in. What do you think is he ever going to concede anything? If you take that step, what you want to do is you want to back off and make it. It's not the city council you want there. You want to order in the city manager. That would have the power to do, and that's going to be a more reasonable person. If you order in the city council, they all have their own agendas. They're not there. It's not their money. It's a power situation that's very counterproductive to settlement.
Yeah, not necessarily. I don't disagree with anything you said there, except that last statement that it may be counterproductive, because sometimes it's not counterproductive. And I don't remember the exact situation that happened here. I had, I think it was Judge Chaffee again, order the general counsel of one of the largest political organizations in the state to come down. No, it wasn't Chaffee. That was Monroe. He tried to Judge Monroe. He ordered one of the general counsel, I'm not going to mention which entity now, to come down to a settlement conference. We were there, we had nobody, I had a lawyer there, and I had no representative of the state agency there, and the lawyer, it was a very unreasonable response we were getting, and it's clear this guy had no power, so I started exploring with him. So, who do you report to? If there is a settlement, who has to approve it? I was able to find out that a certain board, a governing board, had approved this. I said, well, I can ask the judge, I guess, to order the whole governing board here, but I said, who really, who do you have to approve it? I found out from him it was the general counsel of this major public part of California. And Judge Monroe, at my suggestion, ordered that guy down and he was down at the next settlement conference. It was.
I don't have any problem with that. I've been ordered to come sometimes for that very same reason. The attorney is a different entity than the governing board. I've been representing public agencies since 1978. It's changed. It used to be on the city council, most of the time it was a man or a woman who were committed to the community, they were deferential, they were there as public service. I saw a lot of admiration for people who serve in both boards, but most of them are looking for something more. It's a lot of commitment, they're spending a lot of hours on it, and they're working the community, they get elected, and at the end of the day, when you do that, I sincerely now believe, 9 times out of 10, the reaction's gonna be, it doesn't matter what happens at trial, because it's a bad judge or a bad jury. What I'm working on is, will I get elected, and if I can see this, gee, it's a whole different dynamic. People think that elected officials have a business judgment, and many of them come from a business background, but they don't apply that here. It's what affects them individually in getting reelected. And that's a very cynical, for those who don't have experience with public agencies, that's probably the most counterproductive thing you can do is order in a governing board.
Well,
Well, you know, it's a matter of power. You have the power to do what the other side doesn't object to, but you can get away with, and that's the extent of your power. Once they take a writ on you, then at that point, your power ends. In 27 years on the bench, I encountered that situation twice where I felt that the case could only settle if city council got involved. Not just city manager and council, but we needed the city council involved. And what I did is I said, I want a settlement conference that involves city council, and I will have it in my jury room, or I'll travel to city council's chambers. I will meet with you in executive sessions, however you call it, but I want council, city manager, and city council. I want to address you as to why I think this case should settle and why I think that your position so far is a mistake. And both of those cases settled. One of them was done in my jury room, and the other one was done at city council chambers.
Yeah, but I don't disagree with you. One of the things we would get to, and maybe we'll do it now, is some of the hardest cases to settle are cases with governmental agencies, because you're 100% correct. They would rather have a jury decide award $1 million against their enemy than vote to pay $50,000, because for all the political reasons that you said.
You have to also think about the attorney, just as an example, brief war story. Many years ago, and I won't mention the city here in Orange County, but many of you remember Judge Jerry Oliver.
Oh, that's right.
Well, I had a case defending police officers who were accused of violating civil rights. And at the time of trial, the main defendant was already serving time. Remember, it took a long time to get to trial in those days? He was serving time in federal prison. He'd been a member of a regional narcotics task force, and the facts aren't all that important, but a 50-year-old woman I thought was really over time. She had sustained a very bad fracture of her elbow. I mean, it wasn't a lot of money, but there. Anyway, Judge Oliver was able to negotiate a $5,000 settlement. Remember, we used to have the settlement conferences in the embassies the Friday before trial? And then he continued the trial for 2 weeks so that I could go back to the city council to get approval. When I went to the city council, they said, not just hell, but hell no. I came back to Judge Oliver, and he said, Dan, you will get $5,000 or bring your toothbrush. And I believe, as much as I've written, I still believe it. They still wouldn't do it. Now, the kicker of that story is, sometimes you get lucky and you're lucky in this trial. It was a tough trial, and it cost them, could have settled for $5,000 at the time, in fact, it cost $20,000 for the trial. Afterwards, the city council wanted to meet with me. I went there expecting great approbation. I'd done all the work at that time. That was the last case I ever worked on for them. Their position was, we told you no, you won't accept what we say, we're done. So keep in mind, there is an element of self-preservation when you're representing a public agency too. There is an issue there, and maybe it's a conflict. It's realistic. I'm just telling you, when you're talking about public agencies, it's not the same dynamics as settlement conference.
This is the next part of 316 I want to focus on is the felony liquor. Oh, go ahead.
That's Gino, pull out 2 more names, please.
Oh, yeah. Somebody has to get that chocolate and licorice. Don't want to do that.
Catherine Coffey. And Lisa McMains.
I will take the last of the chocolate. Thank you very much. What am I supposed to take? One of those?
That's what's left. You got red kids.
My daughter's a red wine fan.
This may not be the appropriate time to ask this, The thing that I find is most difficult to deal with in a settlement conference, other than a pro per, is when there is a pending motion for summary judgment. It's, you know, which I usually suggest that they just continue it until after it's heard. Continue the MSC until after it's heard, because as long as that's pending, nobody wants to do anything. They spent the money, and by damn, they're going to have the judge. They want the judge to rule.
Yeah.
So, any strategies on that?
Well, and that's a good question to throw, because that happens a lot. You get that a lot at settlement conferences, where there's a pending dispositive motion of some kind, summary judgment or something else. And some of the judges, so I'll go to some of the judges and ask them, say, you know what, they got the motion set on June 20th, can't we kick this over to June 27th? Or something like, some of the judges say, no, I'd much rather have them try to settle it with that thing pending. But, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But anybody have any, that's out of order of what we're doing here, but that's fine. I think it's a really good question. Anybody have any suggestions on it? What do you do with this positive motion that's pending in 2 weeks, and you got them at an MSC now? Any thoughts on that? Bruce, you look like you're going to say something, but you're not going to say something.
I think I would just push through and try to settle it, but it kind of depends upon the case, but I think that would be my initial reaction.
It's right there, right then. Yeah. Bill?
The party who's got the motion pending is the one who's going to be harder to move. I just ask them, how many times do they get summary judgment motions granted? Even meritorious ones, they think they're going to win. How many times does it happen? And my answer is rarely. And so that's one way to get them off. We're going to win, we don't even worry.
Yeah, so you're like Bruce, you're in favor of just going ahead at that point rather than kicking it over.
Yes.
Anybody else, any comments on that?
Just rule on a motion.
Yeah, well, okay. and sometimes I kind of go back to the judge, I kind of want to give him an idea what he or she's going to do, and say, let me know, I'll tell him, so we can settle this case. So that's a good idea. Right?
I'd like to point out the very low bar that the defendant has in opposing a summary judgment motion. It's amazing to me sometimes the experienced trial lawyers who really don't understand how easy it is to defeat a summary judgment motion, but some disputed fact.
If one of you came to me and said, Judge, this settlement conference we should continue because we're pending summary judgment motion, I'd say probably, is it a statute of limitations issue? And if they said yes, I said, okay, I'll continue it. Any other issue? Nah. The odds that it's not going to be granted by long odds.
And I think most of the judges that I deal with on the MSCs prefer that the MSC go ahead, regardless of the fact that there's a dispositive motion. Dale, you got a minute?
I just did this a couple weeks ago, and what I had running was the parties themselves were having this discussion. And they were so invested in the motion because they believed their lawyer who told them they were going to win that I concluded, screw it, we're not going to do anything until the motion's ruled on.
Yeah, sometimes you reach that result on your own. You just talk to them and nobody's going to move. They both want to know what's going to happen on that motion. And you have to move on. There's, are we finished at 4 o'clock? Is that what this is? 4:15? All right, so we're getting Well, he's going to order you to stay here at 4:15. As a pro tem, I'll make that order. So I'm going to skip some of the stuff here, or maybe just talk about really briefly. Failure to participate in good faith is an unlawful interference. I don't think I have ever seen anyone ever be sanctioned for not participating in good faith. It's threatened sometimes, and the judges sometimes said OSCs, but I've never, ever. Anybody seen that happen? Anybody sanctioned for not participating? Okay, so that doesn't happen, okay. 5 days prior to the hearing must serve a settlement demand on all defendants. I am stunned at the number of times that does not happen. You would think if you're a plaintiff going to a settlement conference, you want to get some money, and you make a demand, but that's actually less than half the time. Is that a common experience too for the rest of you guys? Yeah.
Way less.
Yes. Way less than that. Here's the one that may take some time to talk about, and this is my biggest pet peeve, I would say, is that you must notify all insurance carriers who may provide coverage, and that they have present a representative with full and unconditional authority to settle. That's something I rarely find that happens, is a representative of an insurance company with full and unconditional authority to settle. Is Tom Cummings still here? Yeah, I can see the shirt actually, pending through. I can see your shirt through the crowd here.
I'm here.
Because I've raised that issue with you, I think, and I think with Bill Lawson also, on numerous occasions. How do you know when you have the right person? Or is it just easy, or you
Just assume you don't.
just assume you don't? I mean, any comments on that? Because I think that's the biggest pet peeve I have with the treatment. Bill?
The biggest issue is, what is full and unconditional authority? All the adjuster has to say, I have full unconditional authority, I just do not propose to extend it.
Yeah, but I don't accept that, because they don't have full and unconditional authority. And I really try to explore that. So, well, for example, what if they were to demand $35,000 or something like that? Would you have to go talk to somebody to get authority for that? And oftentimes they'll say, yes, I would have to. And then I say, okay, well, who do you have to talk to? I don't accept that as the answer.
Well, if there is a, say, bad faith issue, the adjuster will probably just have authority for the policy limits. He's got to go to somebody else, another level and so forth, to go beyond that. And typically they don't do that unless they get close to trial, like usually close. But full and unconditional, that's a nebulous number. You don't know what it is.
Yeah, but sometimes you know it when you see it. You just know they don't have that authority. Anybody have any other comments on that?
Well, like, there's levels. I find that, like State Farm, for instance, the adjuster will come in there, I have full authority, up to $25,000. That's my full authority.
Yeah, well, I understand that too.
So she's not lying.
What do you do about that? Do you accept that and say, okay, we're just going to go ahead with you here, or?
No, I ordinarily don't. I say, get me the person who has the next extended authority. If I feel that, the range is 5,000 or 10,000 more, get her on the line, we put her on the phone on the line.
Do you ever order them there?
I would order and come back on another one.
Yeah, so you do order them to come back?
I do, yeah, well, I don't order. I order the clerk to make the suggestion, and the clerk orders them.
Right. Well, we talked about that. They're important. Any other comments on that? All right. Tom, nothing to add, or?
Well, it's a sliding scale what full authority is. Is it $35 million in your eyes, or is it $35,000 in the defense attorney's eyes? And the case review committee who looked at the case before the MSC. I don't know who makes the definition and what's right or what's wrong.
So do you ignore that issue, in other words? If you're at a settlement conference and there's this third-party adjuster there who says that he or she has full authority, and you just accept that?
No, and I think it was Mitch over there said it. If you've got a demand that is close to the offer, but they're saying that's full authority, you want to get somebody else who's got $1 more than that authority or $100 more than that authority to come down or make a phone call.
Well,
On that point, $35 million, I think we all know the settlement range of a case, the value of a case. Let's say it's between $30,000 and $50,000, and the plaintiff is within that range, 30 to 50, and the defense, here comes the adjuster, I have full authority, and I offer no more than $10,000. So you engage the attorney. Why? Tell me. And the risks of the case and the facts of the case and so on, convince me. You can't convince me. Then at that point, I know that guy doesn't have authority. His hands are tied and it's tied back at the office. And so in a situation like that, then I'd say talk to the judge in the courtroom, judicial officer, judge. I feel that somebody came here without authority and see if the judge will order somebody to travel.
Anything wrong with asking the adjuster why he or she doesn't have policy limit authority?
You're going to call the underwriter who set the reserves? The reserves play a big role in all this.
Yeah, it's I think, maybe what Bill said, it's not an easy question to deal with as far as I'm concerned, but it's my biggest pet peeve and my biggest thing that I think fails at settlement conferences when insurers are involved, is you don't have a person there who's going to settle this case. And that's what, and I spend a lot of time on that. That's a big thing for me to explore who really needs to be here. And I think I'm relatively successful at that in determining this isn't the right person. So, and particularly, again, I mentioned when you have a third-party adjuster, doesn't work for the insurance insurer, doesn't work for the plaintiff, doesn't work for the defendant, is a third party, and that bothers me more than just about anything that I encounter here.
So what do you do that's effective?
Probably nothing that's effective, but, again, I explore it. I talk a lot about it. I try to figure out where, I do the best job I can to pierce this mysterious veil that I don't understand, and I always turn to Bill or to Tom to explain to me what's going on here, because I don't understand how insurance companies work at all, and I never will probably, but I do my best at that point to try and figure out what's going on. And I've often audited other people. It's people from the place along the freeway, the 57. Is that Mercury along the 57 or wherever it is? I've ordered people out from Hartford. We've had that discussion. I said, we're going to do it next week. But, and then the response you always get, well, the offer's not going to go any higher. They're not going to offer any more. And in fact, if they have to come out and we're going to offer less, that's not my experience. That doesn't happen. And I say that, well, I say, okay, you say that, but it's not my experience. And regardless, she's coming out or he's coming out in that thing. So.
Well, sometimes that happens. Sometimes the defense does not move one nickel. And at that point, I can come to plaintiff's counsel and say, plaintiff's counsel, this case may be worth $12,000, but they got a 998 on you, they spent $15,000 in costs, they're going to come out after your client for the cost, and all you're going to get is $6,500. That's less than the case is worth, but that is what it is. And I have gone deep, deep to the well. I ordered the supervisor to appear. The supervisor's here. I talked to the supervisor. What do you want to do? And at that point, plaintiff's counsel said, at this point, I'm folding.
And Frank, I don't think that's mutually exclusive with what we're talking about, because I do that too. When I believe I've got the right person there, and that right person tells me, you know what, we got 12,000, whatever the number is, we got $12,000, and that's all it's going to be. But I think then I'll do exactly what you do. I'll go to plan. This is it. You can try this case, and you can hit that home run, and you can get $1 million, or you can get 12,000. They're not going any higher. Lots of times they end up taking that 12,000, or whatever the number is. Bill?
Different tools for different situations, but if the parties are close enough, and you really, this case ought to settle, and but they're stuck with the authority limit, you can make a mediator's proposal and give them a short time, and most of the time that'll get it unstuck. But it has to be tempting, it has to be a tempting number.
Yeah, since we're very short, let's talk about mediator's proposal. How many of you guys use mediator's proposals at MSC? So a good handful do it, and a lot of people are opposed to those. And I think Bill is right. Insurance companies, my experience with them is exactly what you just said, that they'll give you a number, we're not going above 35,000 no matter what happens. You'll come in with a mediator's proposal at 37.5, and they'll go there at that point. So, somebody have a comment over here? Okay. Any other comments on that? Let's see. Oh yeah, this is a question I always ask. I want to read this part of the rule. We'll talk about plaintiff. If a plaintiff is an entity and all persons whose consent to a settlement is necessary must be present, and that's rare, unless the representative present has written authority signed by all persons whose consent is required, extending unlimited and unconditional authorization. So every time we've done this, I've asked for a show of hands. Has anybody ever seen that written authorization is signed by all persons whose consent is necessary? Nobody's seen that. I have now seen it one time. This was in a settlement conference about 2 or 3 months ago, where the lawyer pulled out the thing signed by exactly saying it. The lawyer was an out-of-state lawyer, pro hoc BC, who had read 316. And that's because local lawyers don't read 316. But this lawyer hadn't showed up with a written authorization, so I can no longer say, because I have here that it never happened once in the history of the universe. Yeah, never once in the history of the universe. It has now happened once in the history of the universe that I've seen that. Frank, we're kind of running out of time. Anything else you want to hit?
I would get those requests from lawyers, and I signed a lot of those. I've got an out-of-state adjuster, I've got an out-of-state client. It's really impossible for them to travel for whatever reasons, and they have to be available on the phone until end of the day.
Yeah, and available on the phone, what I like to get the order is that, not that they can be reached, that they're there on the phone. That's not like you have to call, because that happens a lot too. I gotta call my adjuster, they're back in Hartford, and then, 20 minutes later, I got the adjuster, or wait for a return call. And what I will do, if I'm gonna continue things, and judges will do that also, they'll order that the adjuster doesn't have to be present, but they have to be on the phone during the entire time of the MSC, which makes that a lot easier. Let's see what else we got here on this. Well, that's it on 316. I mean, we've got the rule there, and I suggest you read it. You've got my wise-ass comments on 316. Also, you can read those if you're so inclined. We've got three more workers, by the way. We want to have Gina pull out 3 more names. I think we're running out of time.
All right, Gina, pull out 3 more names.
I'm going to go hand out a few more of these balls to the deserving questioners.
Scott Field,
Okay. You get one.
Ann Healy,
Lawson. I don't want to hit anybody.
and Donald McIntyre.
Lawson gets the ball. Lawson got it. Somebody else got it. I like these.
Get them to special, not me. Thank you. Might be helpful. Let's see. We're supposed to go to 4:15 because we started at 1:15. However, I think we can finish out at 4 so long as you fill out the back of that form while we talk here with that important question over there. And that is, what can the trial judge do to help you improve your success or satisfaction as a settlement officer? Give us some tips. Give us some tips for the supervising judge. I'll make sure that the supervising judge gets these pearls of wisdom from you. And if a certain pearl of wisdom gets mentioned more than twice, that's something that they'll really take a closer look at.
All right, one of the things, I'm just looking at some of the, while you're filling that out, here's some of the notes I have here that we were going to talk about. I don't get too hung up with the facts of the law. I listen to the case. I have them explain to me who's suing whom for what. And I get a little bit of the law and a little bit of the facts, but I don't spend a lot of time on the law and the facts. I kind of get down to the numbers, and I talk about just the realities of trying a case, and how expensive it's going to be, and the chances of winning and all that. I know there are a lot of lawyers who don't take that approach, who really get intensively involved in the law and the facts of the case, but that's not something I do a lot of. Another thing I would suggest, and sometimes this doesn't happen, is get a demand. Get a number from the plaintiff at some point. I usually try to do that fairly early on. Get a number. I almost always tell the plaintiff, we're going to get a number now, because we're about to talk, we're going to get a number. The number's going to offend you. It's going to be ridiculously high. And then, and then I'll tell the plaintiff, we're going to get an offer. The offer's going to be ridiculously low. You're going to tell me it's offensive, and they're not here in good faith, and that's probably all true. But just ignore the initial demand and ignore the opening offer. And let's see if we can get beyond that. See if we can actually move this case for a settlement. Yeah, look at my notes here. It's like you ignore the other one. Everybody seems, I rarely ask, I use this line a lot because people seem to like it. I just tell them, I'm not going to ask you for your bottom line or your top line because everybody lies to me anyway. And they do. They always lie to you about what their top line. I don't think I've ever met a bottom line or top line that was actually a bottom line or a top line. Frank, anything you want to talk on in the last few minutes we got going here?
At that point, sometimes I get a demand that is so ridiculous that I say, come on. Don't give me that number. I don't want to present that number to the other side because you give me that number, $1 million on this case, you're going to come with an offer of $1,000. And then when I bring that offer of $1,000 back to you, you're going to say, I'm offended by that $1,000. So then you're going to come back down to $995,000. And look, at that point, we've wasted 30 minutes. I don't want to go there. Don't want to go there. I've read the briefs. You don't give me that number of $1 million. If you need to talk to your client, and I walk out the door. I'll be back in 2 minutes. Come back in 2 minutes, and sometimes they still start with that stupid number of $1 million that just, gets in the way and slows down our dance. And sometimes they listen to me and they come in with a more realistic number. Yes?
Well, you know that every side needs to participate in the rain dance side. And if you deny them the rain dance, just going back to $1 million offer, 1,000 on the other side, you will, I think, regret it. So I've learned that, take the first 15 minutes and engage in this rain dance of, that first offer, and the reasons why. But if you kind of get them to think that you are denying them and you're getting mad at them for engaging in that, it's just the nature of the beast. So even though, perhaps 2 or 3 settlement conferences in 3 hours, you can't let them go on and on, but in most mediations, I allow a few minutes for that, what I call a rain dance. It has to be played out, you're receptive to it, and then let's go on to the merits, rather than criticizing them for engaging in the rain dance.
And that's the beauty of this process. This is not a science, this is an art. We're both right. We're both right at the same time. Yes, okay.
Yeah, when you're faced with nonsense, opening, offer, demand, you really have an obligation to communicate it?
Yeah, I think you do, and I do, and I prepped for that. I mean, I manage the expectations, say they're gonna make a demand, it's gonna be ridiculous. I'm gonna ask you just to ignore it, come back with what you think is a good way to start the negotiation process. They usually don't, they'll usually lowball it at that point. I'll go back to the plaintiff and say, just like we predicted, they're coming back, now let's see if we can start this process going. I think they have an obligation to communicate it. Is there anybody who doesn't think they have an obligation to communicate it? Okay. Oh, go ahead.
Something that I've seen enough that it kind of bothers me is, my first question to the parties is usually, have there been any settlement discussions prior to today? I get no so many times. Has the plaintiff given you a demand? No, so many times. I wish that they at least had a starting point on our first day. I'll stay with it until it settles, if there's any possibility, but it would be awfully nice if they even at least gotten to that starting point.
Yeah, and that doesn't happen a lot of the time. There's a hand in the back, too.
My first question out of the mouth to all counsel and the parties is, have you exchanged written offers and demands as required by Rule 316 of the Rules of Court? And I get the same thing every time, like I got this morning, blank looks on the faces. Maybe the trial judge can say, not the trial judge, when the trial date is set, can say, and by the way, ladies and gentlemen, Rule 316 of California Rules of Court will be strictly enforced at this settlement conference. Maybe they will exchange written offers and demands.
Yeah, I agree with that last part. There ought to be some more education, I think, from these trial judges about, we have a rule here. The rule in Orange County says this is what you got to do. And I'm expecting you guys to do this when you show up, because I think you're 100% right. They come in there, they haven't exchanged demands, they haven't spoken to each other or anything. So I think that's 100% correct. One note here, this is one of Frank's notes, don't let the settlement slip away by failing to get it in writing or on the record. I think that's very important. If you get a settlement, put it on the record, go find it, take it back up to the department, get a court reporter. Sometimes they don't want it on the record, sometimes insurance companies or defendants will come with settlement agreements, and that's okay, but get it on the record one way or another. And then Ben, I think it was Ben who said something earlier about the kumbaya moment with the insurance adjuster. Every once in a while, I have done something that surprised me that it worked. I'll have an insurance adjuster, I'll have an insurance offer of $35,000, I'll get the defendant down to $36,500, and nobody's going anywhere at that point. And I'd always say, I'm not interested in fairness, justice, or equity, I just want to settle this thing. But I'll go to the adjuster and I'll say, look, this $1,500 difference is way, way more important to this mom than it is to you guys. I realize it's important to you, I realize you got a boss you report to, and you guys roundtable this, and $35,000, but it's way, way more important. So if, I said, I'm not interested in fairness, but if I was, I would say it's just fair if you guys paid that $1,500. And occasionally it works, occasionally there's a heart inside of that adjuster that beats, and they settle the case for that, so.
Do you think it would help in order to ensure compliance with 316, that the courts start handing out sanctions to get people on board and to stop the gameplay, because that's what really what it is?
Yes, I think it would. I don't think it's going to happen.
Can I make a suggestion on the back of that form there? If a lot of you write it down, please, court, start enforcing 316, put some teeth to it. They might listen. Okay, before we close here, I think it's very important if a case fails to settle, I think it's very important that you gather the attorneys in joint session and you explain how far you've come today, what concessions have been made, if there have been any settlement offers, demands with any specific conditions, like to be paid within 18 months, that whatever the number is, but you can't agree the final number. Just make sure you recap what progress you make today so that they know that they are this far and they're both clear on what that this far is. And that way, you leave an opening for the case to settle prior to trial. Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, there's a lot more that we had on our list to cover, and we haven't covered a lot of it, but a lot of, as we said at the beginning, you guys, a lot of you know as much about this process as we do, and I think it's good to talk about this. One last comment?
Yes, I just read 316B and then 2C, and essentially it says that 5 days before the settlement conference, the plaintiff has to send a demand. And then no later than 5 days after, the defense has to give a response. Well, if the plaintiff's counsel sends it 5 days before and sends it by mail, the response is due 3 days after the MSC. That's ridiculous.
Well, yeah, okay, that should be changed somewhat. I don't agree with that, but it never happens anyway.
No, I understand that, but perhaps it should be rewritten.
Write that down on your suggestion thing. I agree. All right, well, that's it.
I think that's it.
Thank you.
And and thank you for coming in. A lot of you give a lot of your time to the court. It's extraordinarily important, especially at this time. We used to have 30 judicial officers doing civil, 30. And then we are reduced to 27. I think we're down to about 22 judicial officers on the civil panel. The work that you do is more important than ever before. So thank you.